Meeting. It is now 1:30 and I'd like to call the meeting to order. Could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Goldberg,
Present.
Commissioner Peters is absent. Commissioner David,
Present.
Vice Mayor Stern,
Present.
Mayor Moore,
Present.
Town Manager Labadie,
Present.
and Town Attorney Tresivia.
If we could please rise for the pledge. United States of America. One nation, under God, indivisible. So we have a revised agenda. Are there any changes to the revised agenda?
No changes.
If no changes, we have a motion.
I move that we accept the agenda as revised. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, the presentations, proclamations, resolution 2023-026, which is a resolution of the Town Commission of Highland Beach, Florida, recognizing and commending Leland Butch Harple for 30 years of service to the town of Highland Beach. Whereas Leland Harple started with the town of Highland Beach in 1993, and he started as an electrician operator trainee and moved his way up and is now the water treatment plant operator, which he began in the year 2000 and has been the plant operator ever since. And Leland has pursued continuous professional development and participated in numerous educational conferences, earning certificates, in order, to operate as the water plant operator. Leland is respected for his ability to evaluate situations and make good decisions. He's displayed outstanding teamwork and initiative in all aspects of his career. Leland has been a crucial member of the Public Works Department water treatment plant team and has made a significant impact to the town of Highland Beach. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Town Commission of Highland Beach, Florida, that we wholeheartedly extend our profound gratitude and sincere appreciation to Leland Harple for his exceptional 30 years of dedicated service to the town of Highland Beach. And we wish Leland good health and an abundant, joyful retirement. So thank you very much. Yeah, yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much. And if we could take a picture,
Yeah.
that would be great. Thank you so much. Yeah, if you want to get a picture. Can we get all in? Thank you. Congratulations.
And let the commission know there'll be a luncheon on Friday at noon here. So if you'd like to join us to say goodbye.
Wonderful,
Yep.
wonderful. We wish you the best. Our next presentation is from the Palm Beach County Coastal Management Program. Mr. Andy Stutt will be presenting. Welcome.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't bring handouts of the presentation. This on? Should be. Thank you. All right, I think she's gonna draw up that presentation full screen. I'll just start out by thanking you for having me here. Andy Stute, I manage the county's coastal resources management program. That's everything from beach nourishment to dune restoration to inlet management. Where we aren't managing projects directly, we're working with municipalities to help them out on their projects with funding or permitting assistance if needed. So it's really a comprehensive program that runs the entire length of the county. And again, just appreciate the opportunity to connect with you folks and be able to be here for any questions you have after this. I'm going to start out by getting into kind of the generalities of our program and how it applies to the whole county. And then I'll kind of drill down on Highland Beach at the end from the outside looking in and take any questions you might have. This first slide here is a great demonstration for me of some of the challenges we face in Palm Beach County. This obviously isn't Highland Beach. This is our next nearest inlet to the north, South Lake Worth Inlet, also known as Boynton Inlet. And while it's not Highland Beach, it really demonstrates the issues that are faced here as well. We've got this extensive nearshore hard bottom that's a natural feature that's heavily protected by state and federal regulators. We've got a narrow beach profile. We've got parks, roads, buildings built right on top of the native dune system. We've got inlets. We've got this beautiful water that brings in plenty of endangered species that we have to contend with when we do these projects. So there's a bunch of beautiful resources. That's why people live here. That's why people come here, but it makes it very challenging for us to manage this coastal environment due to the regulatory environment we face. So again, just kind of a broad overview, location. I mentioned why we all live here. It's beautiful. We've got 47 miles of Atlantic coastline in Palm Beach County. Just doing a rough estimate, it looks like Highland Beach has about 2.85 miles. Almost or a little over 70% of Palm Beach County's entire coastline is considered by the state to be critically eroded. That's a designation that allows local sponsors or local project managers to access funding from the state to deal with that critical erosion. Almost the entirety of Highland Beach, and I'll show that in the map later, is not considered critically eroded. And that's not because we don't face erosion issues in this area of coastline. It's just because there's not been a number of studies or additional monitoring to go after some of those funds or try to manage the coastline actively here. We've got 4 inlets, Jupiter Lake Worth, South Lake Worth, just to the north of here, and Boca to the south. Again, extensive nearshore hard bottom resources. And we're at the end of the kind of Hurricane Alley. So we've got the major development area in the mid-Atlantic. It's not a matter of if we're going to get hurricanes, it's when. So that's a lot of what our program is focused on, is preparing prior to those hurricanes. That way we don't have damage when they do get here. Obviously we want to protect infrastructure, but we want there to be a beach there when we get past the storm too, both for people and for turtles and for all the critters that use it. So again, it's a very long range comprehensive program, but it's not if, but when we're going to get these storms. And we're also facing continual erosion from maintenance of these inlets that also help us out with getting out for boating and economic development. So a lot wrapped into a seemingly simple beach. One of the most important things is that we've historically developed this interface between the land and the sea. So these buildings, as you go along Highland Beach and throughout the county, are built on top of that natural dune system. That was the kind of natural give and take, where we'd get storms that would erode into that dune, and then it would be replaced over the process of years naturally. We built right on top of that. We've hardened it. So now we're having to do these engineered dunes and beaches to kind of keep in front of that, to keep a beach there, whereas naturally erosion would happen. It's going to happen. So in order to keep up with it on a closer time scale with these storms are happening, we have to do some of these projects countywide to address it. Again, just a complex web of stakeholders. We've got 19 coastal municipalities. We've got unincorporated areas. We have a deep water port. We have those 4 inlets. We have 39 total municipalities in Palm Beach County. The number one reason that people come here throughout the county is to go to the beach. Even if they're here for other purposes, they're making beach visits. So it's critically important countywide for us to keep it in good shape. Things that we do elsewhere in the county have positive impacts throughout the county. So beach nourishment adjacent or in other areas, that sand's getting on the beach, but it's all working north to south through Palm Beach County. The natural sand flow is from north to south, about 99% of it. Sometimes it moves north during storm events, but most of the sand is moving north to south. So when we put it up on the beach in one place, it's going to continue moving south and nourish beaches south thereof. And we've got a little over 1.5 million residents, and that's obviously growing every day. Countywide, starting with some of the initial major placements, 1973 and Delray Beach was their first major nourishment. In addition to inlet maintenance, we've steadily increased and then kind of plateaued over the past 2 decades as we've caught up with some of those long-term impacts that we're having before these nourishment programs were in place. So the blue line that you're seeing kind of spike up and down, that's heavily in response to storm events. We're geared on storms and long-term project life cycles. So we take an 11-year moving average. Why 11 years? Because that gets outside of those major storm impactor events and those long project life cycles and allows us to kind of keep an average of what we're placing on the beach. Our goal countywide is to have a little over 1.2 million cubic yards placed per year. We're above that goal by a small amount, so we're kind of keeping track and keeping ahead of these storm impacts with a lot of this work that we're doing. Cost. Cost is an ever increasing challenge for us. Offshore sand sources continue to diminish. We've got easily available sand that's quickly going by the wayside. So we're using new technology to try to screen sand that has a lot of shell in it or a lot of rock that we wouldn't normally be able to put on the beach. So we're always trying to keep up with new regulatory requirements and access these offshore sand sources that are beyond the area where it's expected to come back to the beach. But it's areas where there's good clean sand out there. They were historic beaches from thousands of years ago. So we're able to dredge that most efficiently and put it on the beach in the major beach nourishment areas. The secondary sand source that we go to is upland sand. Those are for our inland sand mines. That gets tremendously expensive. It's beautiful white sand, but it's 2 to 3 times the cost of beach nourishment sand. That is the sand that we would almost always use for dune restoration though, because it obviously doesn't involve coming in from the water. It gets trucked in by land and then put out onto the beach. So any kind of dune restoration that you'd likely see around this area or even in the town itself is going to be using upland sand at a higher cost. And again, those prices continue to go up as we see other areas, specifically Broward and Miami-Dade, that are running out of those offshore sand sources due to nearshore hard bottom and reefs. They're going more to those upland sand mines and they're putting pressure on them. So the price continues to go up with the demand. We're seeing new mines come online, but that's a slow process to get them permitted. Broadly within the county, funding sources. Most of the projects countywide and throughout the state of Florida are contingent on public access. The lion's share of the funding comes from the state. They have an annual appropriation process where they provide, the past couple of years, it's been a recurring $50 million statewide for local municipalities or sponsors to access for their projects. Typically, that provides about 50% cost share for these beach and dune nourishment projects within areas with public accessibility. If you don't have public accessibility, you can't access those funds. Federal funding is the other biggest wedge. We've got the Army Corps that participates in large beach nourishments where there is a significant cost to benefit to cost ratio. So North Boca is your next nearest to the south, and then Delray. Those are both federal projects. So the Army Corps will come in and cost share on the regular nourishments. And they'll also come in after storms and they'll completely replace any storm losses as part of their flood control and coastal emergencies program. Those are 2 huge benefits that are kind of local here that keep up with these storms and put sand on the beaches north and south. Delray kind of acts as a feeder beach for Highland Beach and continues to move sand south. And then Boca Raton kind of stops up sand moving south because they're putting out these large amounts of sand to keep up with erosion that's going on. The other obvious federal funding source is FEMA. And that can be on non-federal participation beaches, so not Delray or North Boca, but any of the other project areas that are not Army Corps involved. That could even involve private beaches like throughout the town. If you were to build and demonstrate a dune restoration program and show that you're keeping up with it, if there were storm damages, you'd be able to apply for FEMA assistance. And that can cost share up to 75%. It doesn't require public access. So that's an important component that entities use statewide. We certainly use it on our project areas. And that's a huge component of storm funding for us. And then local municipalities and county covers the rest of it for the countywide projects. The county's funding is not ad valorem. It's part of the TDC bed taxes. So a portion of those TDC bed taxes collected countywide go towards the beach nourishment fund. We spend that as match funds for state and federal grant dollars. We put that directly on the beaches on projects that we manage, and then we also provide up to 20% cost share for municipalities that manage their own programs. And that is again contingent on public accessibility. So now getting into a little bit more of the specifics of Highland Beach. And again, this is kind of the outside looking in for me. And one of the biggest things I want to do is provide the opportunity to take a few questions at the end. Public access, I mentioned a number of times in the previous slide, is a huge component of most of the projects statewide. You can't get that state or federal regular funding without some component of public access. On the furthest most left map, we've got one of DEP's maps that shows critically eroded areas. And that's where, again, you can see Highland Beach is kind of sandwiched right in the middle of Delray to the north and Boca to the south. It's not currently considered critically eroded. That would require some consulting and engineering work to establish that it were a critically eroded area to move forward with any kind of projects to address erosion. We've got the municipalities map that shows, again, kind of wedged between Delray and Boca to the north, south, and west. And then DEP's public access map that shows the nearest public access to the north is Atlantic Dunes Park and Delray Beach. That's just about a half a mile from the town of Highland Beach's limits. And then on the south end, we've got Spanish River. That access just east of Spanish River Boulevard is the next public access. The furthest most right map, we've got a red line there that comes up from the northernmost Boca Park property. That's DEP's concept of public accessibility. So a half a mile from a publicly owned park with public access of 50 parking spaces or more, that's what gets you public accessibility. So for example, Milani Park, and I'm not going to get into that for many reasons, but if that were to be developed for 50 spaces or more and had public beach access, then that would provide access a half a mile north for the northernmost boundary of that park property. So that would get public access by the state's definition into part of the town to provide cost share, for example, a dune project. That's just kind of the broad outsides of the state funding process. Again, FEMA provides funding, whether or not you have public accessibility, if you're able to establish and maintain a dune program. And one of the most important parts, one of the last slides, but kind of getting back to the first slide, is all of these factors that go into coastal management in Palm Beach County. One of the biggest ones is obviously critical nesting habitat. We've got turtles out there. Everybody loves them. Even if you hate them, you can't get around the people that love them. They're going to be there. They're a challenge for management, but it's really a success story for long-term management. We've got potentially another record year this year for nesting since we've been keeping track of it. It seems like every other year, every couple of years, we have a record year, so that the numbers are going up, the trajectory is going up. The entirety of Palm Beach County, that 47-mile coastline, is considered by the federal government to be critical nesting habitat. It's designated as critical nesting habitat. So all of the beach is protected during marine turtle nesting season. That heavily restricts what we can do construction-wise. We're limited to wintertime for construction, for addressing storms or other issues. That also limits when you can even be out there on the beach raking on a regular basis. Other things to consider with critical nesting habitat is lighting. That's something that county has been working on for the past couple decades. We've seen real improvements there. The best advice there is just to constantly be updating your code to keep up with standards and apply your code through code enforcement appropriately. We've got some examples on the right side. The examples are so good that you can't really see them on the washed out projector, but there's some actual photos there with some of the red turtle friendly lights that we've seen success elsewhere in the county. So if you're not aware, when turtles nest, when the hatchlings come out of the nest, they're looking to go to the brightest part of the sky. That would naturally be the open ocean. So they're going to head towards that brightest part of the sky. If you have lights coming onto the beach at night, either directly from buildings or from sky globe, they're going to head up the beach into the dune. They're going to disorient, and that's going to be a problem for them getting out into the water. So again, the best way to address that is to stay on top of lighting code and compliance, and to try to make sure that we knock down as much of that nesting season lighting as possible. Near shore hard bottom, I mentioned it, it's at the left one of each one of these slides that photo shows. We've got kind of a narrow beach system. We've got near shore hard bottom. We've got it in Highland Beach in the central and southern parts of the town. That makes it a challenge to do any kind of the larger projects. So you're likely limited to dune restoration where you're not putting material directly in the water, you're putting it high on the beach. That's not going to get onto the reefs or cause any concerns there or have any issues with any of that critical habitat. Offshore coral reef, that's an important one for the major beach nourishments. Again, I see Highland Beach not having public access as being almost in one of the best positions in that you have two large beach nourishments north and south of you. You have Delray feeding to the north, you've got Boca Raton to the south. Both of those borrow areas that they have are offshore of their projects. In Boca's case, it's somewhat north offshore of Highland Beach. But the important part to consider is that they've worked with through their consulting engineers in the state to very closely ensure that the borrow area is far enough offshore that's not going to impact beaches onshore. So it's beyond what they call the depth of closure, where there's no sand that's reasonably expected that could get back onto the beach from those depths. It's not impacting waves coming onshore. You'd have to have waves that are higher than we've ever seen here to be impacted by these borrow areas. So they may look like they're digging sand from offshore, but it's really a case of them digging from beyond an area where it's reasonably going to move back to the beach. And then putting material south of here that's going to help interrupt that sand flow and put sand on your beaches, basically. So again, it's important to mention that we have those offshore coral reefs here. We have those borrow areas that are adjacent to them, but there's heavy restrictions that are placed on any nourishment that goes on, any digging offshore. There's monitoring before and after the fact to ensure that these reefs are protected. And if there are any impacts, which is less and less likely these days, they're tracking vessels wherever they are, then they'll make sure they're mitigated for. Basically, the entire impact will be replaced in kind. So there's just a ton of work that goes into these projects, the larger projects that go on, but the biggest benefit is up down drift. It's not just the area where it's happening. It's putting sand into the system that's going to stay in the system. And then the last couple items, just native dune plants, shorebird nesting, coastal rack. It's not just the turtles, it's not just the fish and the reefs, it's also that habitat on the very high part of the dune. There's all kinds of shorebirds that would naturally nest along our shorelines. They have a tougher and tougher time finding it. You know, you have a seawall and you don't have any of those native plants. Those native plants help hold the sand in place. They help catch windblown sand, but they also act as habitat that's important for other coastal species. Coastal rack, sargassum. We've had that in the news lately. It's become a big issue. The county's policy is we prefer to leave it in place unless it gets so significant that it becomes a hazard. The reason we prefer to leave it in place, people generally don't like it. It can smell, it's ugly, but it's a really important natural component of the beach and dune system. The beach and dune system is nutrient poor. There's no fertilizer that gets naturally onto the beach. So that sargassum, that seaweed, those various offshore seed sources that find their way onto the beach, that's what helps grow those dune plants and helps accrete sand on the upper part of the dune. So we certainly understand raking programs. You know, we're not out to kill those off. Those are going to happen, but as much tolerance as there can be for some amount of native coastal rack, that's just beneficial to the whole system. And I think that's kind of the long and short of the broader strokes, and then getting into the specifics. My last slide is a picture of one of the emergency dune restorations that we just completed this winter at Singer Island. We had hurricanes Ian and Nicole pass through, not directly in our area, but they don't need to pass directly through our area to impact us. You know, we have those deep waters right offshore of the Gulf Stream. We can get waves that come around that Bahamas bank and impact us from nor'easters even. So we're regularly impacted by these storms that are far away from us, but that stresses the importance of having an ongoing regular program to address those damages where they occur worst. That project this winter is a good example of just a pure dune restoration. We've applied for FEMA funding. We'll be hopeful to get 75% there. And then as part of the state's emergency bill they passed in December, we have some additional funding from the state. So anytime there's a storm, we've got great connections with our state and federal partners to do restoration immediately. Funding sources have been great the past decade or so. Everyone understands how important the beach, the dunes are, the coastal environment is, both to our residents, to tourists, to everybody. So it's really been a good collaborative program. Partnerships are key to us. And again, that's kind of why I'm happy to be here, to be able to say a few words and then take any questions if you might have them.
Yeah, question. Thank you for coming. If you take Highland Beach and you say, look at 20 years ago to today, what would be the status of the size of the beach in those, in that timeframe?
Well, we have aerials going back 20 years. The county, through our department, collects annual coastal aerials. And what we're trying to look at is near shore hard bottom exposure, but we're also looking at beach widths and how that's changed. I can't comment specifically without looking at the data. I can say broadly in Palm Beach County, we've got areas that gain and areas that lose sand. So a lot of that's going to be a factor of how recent the nourishments were in Delray Beach to the north or in Boca to the south, and how that sand is moving as a pulse through the system. One of the big interrupters to that process is obviously storms and then seawalls. Seawalls are one of our greatest challenges in that we don't fault coastal property owners for wanting to protect their property, but at the same time, seawalls go in and they accelerate erosion when they're impacted by waves. So anything we can do in the sense of trying to do dune restoration in lieu of seawalls is a good thing for keeping the beach in place, but we're seeing more and more seawalls go in, again, understanding the need to protect coastal property, but that can kind of accelerate erosion, particularly during storm events.
So you do or don't have data for Highland Beach on the north end, on the south end, as far as size of beach, any smaller or larger?
The county doesn't collect regular monitoring profiles within the town of Highland Beach. As part of Boca and Delray Beach's projects, they should be collecting data that gets somewhat into Highland Beach as downdrift and updrift engineering studies. And that data should be available through the state. All of that data is submitted to DEP. So again, the county doesn't collect it directly in project areas or outside of project areas. We do annual monitoring within our project areas and then downdrift and updrift of our directly managed project areas. So I believe that some of that data may exist. I haven't seen it. But you should be able to get access to it and I can kind of point you in the right direction. So that's kind of the first step towards, you would work with typically an engineering consultant to establish that your beach is critically eroded. You're going to do a study of the beach to determine a long-term, how much have you lost to show that there's an issue there. Again, that's easy to work with engineering consultants in the state to show that there's an issue. So that's kind of the first step. And then the second step is leveraging potentially public access to access those regularly recurring grant funds. Not outside of FEMA. So FEMA would be the only source where you would be able to get funds for damages that occur from a storm. You would have to build and show that you've maintained, for example, a dune restoration or a dune nourishment project. FEMA is looking to see that you have a regular program in place to maintain this protective feature that's going to save them cost of replacing infrastructure that may be damaged. So you would have to start out with a dune restoration or nourishment program and then show that you've done regular maintenance. Regular maintenance doesn't have to be that onerous. We have some projects that can go 6 or 8 years without having to need any nourishment of the dune. It's all dependent on storm impacts. And then when you get those storm impacts, that's when you can demonstrate, okay, we've lost sand. Now you can access cost share to replace some of that sand. So the state's criteria for cost share on these shore protection programs is a half a mile from the access, or if you have a public park, for instance, Milani, it would be the northern boundary of that public park. So a half mile north of there, you would be able to get cost share on, typically up to 50% from the state, because they're considering that to be publicly accessible. Publicly accessible means you can walk along the beach, everything's publicly accessible now. It's just a long walk. So anything below mean low water is publicly accessible. So it's just a shoreline length. It's not necessarily that they're saying the entire beach is publicly accessible.
I also have two questions. One, are you recommending that people bury the sargassum?
That's a tricky one. The typical practice for beach rakers is to bury it below mean low water. So they'll go out there at low tide, they'll collect as much as they can, and they'll bury it below the high tide line. Now, the problem with that is it can be re-exposed during wave events. It comes up nastier than it went in. The other option and concept that's been discussed recently is burying it up at the dune line. The problem with that is you can't do that all summer long because we've got turtle nesting. There's basically no digging allowed on the beach. And that's the reason the state, they require this to be permitted, this activity. They'll require you to bury it below mean high water because they know that there's no nests that are surviving there anyway. So there's been some desire from local municipalities. I know I've seen it in Ocean Ridge to put the material at the toe of the dune or even bury it. It would be challenging during sea turtle nesting season from March 1st to October 31st to get that permitted simply because there's typically no digging allowed on the beach.
But would it be allowed the other 6 months of the year?
Potentially. And again, that would likely need to go through a state permitting process to ensure that the turtle folks can have their say in their comments. They might need to bury it below a certain depth, below a depth that a turtle could dig. That way a turtle's not digging 6 inches down and hitting this cavity of decaying stuff. Turtle nests are typically 18 to 24 inches deep. So I would expect that it would probably have to be buried 3 feet or deeper.
And since Milani Park would be a county park, should that beach erode, who's responsible for fixing it?
Well, again, not wanting to get too much into the political side of that. That one is a tricky one because there's that nearshore rock exposure and that is heavily protected. So there's never going to be, well, I wouldn't say never, but there's not in the near term going to be beach nourishment there. If there were a county park developed there, most of the county parks within Palm Beach County, we work very closely with our parks department to manage the beach and dune area, my program, to try to ensure that if there are damages, we can come in and replace the dune losses. So we would only be replacing the upper beach losses in those areas where there's significant nearshore hard bottom to try to protect it. So placing material on the upper part of the beach or restoring any of that high profile dune erosion.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I had a question about like where the dredging and then, so how is it determined? So when they did do the Boca Beaches, how was it determined the source of where they dredged?
It is a years-long process.
Okay.
Typically, the local sponsor for the project, in this case, Boca Raton, will work with their engineering consultant to look at broad area sand cores. So over the decades, there have been surveillance that's gone on offshore with these sand cores, vibratory cores, where they go down throughout the area offshore Palm Beach County and try to characterize the sand. Where's good and where's bad? When there's consulting engineers are trying to develop borrow area, they'll look more closely and potentially get more data on that sediment to see if it's really beach compatible. That's the big issue, is making sure the turtles will be fine with it, the people will be fine with it, it's the right color, can't be too dark, can't be too shelly. So they'll kind of focus in on that area and they'll make sure it's far enough away from reefs. The other big component that I mentioned earlier is it has to be well beyond the depth of closure, where that sand would be, you can't dig a borrow pit right off the beach because that would impact the beach. So it has to be far enough offshore, typically 35, 40 feet or deeper, where it's not going to impact any sand that's moving within the nearshore system. So there's a ton of engineering and geotechnical work that goes into it. And then it has to be permitted through the state. And there's an entire back and forth with the state and with the federal government. And you have all the consulting agencies that come in, NOAA, Fish and Wildlife on the state side. So it's kind of a whole house effort in a regulatory sense to get these borrowers permitted. It typically takes at least 5 years, sometimes more.
And I guess, so along our coastline, so is there just not a lot of good area off of the Boca Raton?
There's a lot
Like-
of reef.
Oh, it's
So-
because there's reef there.
Yeah. And I can't speak specifically for Boca and their process because I'm not tightly familiar with it like I am with the projects that we manage directly, but typically they would be wanting to stay as far as they can away from reef because when you're within 1,000 feet of a reef, that triggers multiple additional monitoring requirements because you don't want turbidity or, some of the sand that gets stirred up into the water to end up on that reef. So trying to stay as far away from reefs, and then not all the sand out there is the same. Some of it, again, has a lot of this rock that's, this size spread throughout it that would be cost prohibitive to remove. So those areas are all off limits. So Palm Beach County is in much better shape with offshore borrow sources than, for example, Broward and Miami-Dade, but there's a finite limit to how much sand is out there that's easily accessible. So, in the case of Highland Beach, there's maybe a little bit less of that offshore coral reef exposure. So there's probably more of an area between where it will impact the beach and where it will impact the reef. I know that during Boca's most recent nourishment for their South Boca project, they targeted the Ebb Shoal, which is just offshore their inland. So it's all about where the most easily recoverable good sand is for the beach. And then all the engineering analysis and permitting that goes into that.
And then is it possible to eventually run out? So like, let's say Highland Beach wants to do it at some point in the future, but someone took the sand off of our beaches. I mean, is that possible? Then it would run out.
Statewide, offshore borrow sources are going to continue to dwindle. And then we're going to move to upland borrow sources, inland sand mines. There's discussion of using non-domestic sand, basically Bahamian sand. That's an issue for a couple of reasons. It's more composed of shell, so it's lighter and gets stirred up easier. There's a couple issues around that. Right now, it's not technically legal, and there's some bills to try to solve that. But we're generally good for the next 50 years offshore borrow source wise, and technology can always improve on that. Ships are able to dig deeper. They're able to screen more of this non-compatible material out. So there's ongoing efforts to develop borrow areas. I think another good example would be at the north end of the county where the county has a borrow area permitted for our North County project. It gets into Martin County, and Martin County has an adjacent borrow source, but that's not uncommon throughout the state for it to cross jurisdictional lines in a smaller sense. It would be very uncommon and much more of an issue for Broward County to move up here and try to dredge sand, or Miami-Dade, and they've asked. And we've indicated that would be much more of an issue, but I think the take home is that if these projects are moving just outside of jurisdictional boundaries, the state has weighed in and ensured that it's healthy for the beach overall. And again, I think that's the biggest benefit that we see for the town is those projects north and south acting as feeder beaches. So there will still be sand offshore as long as it's accessible, and then it's going to move to inland sand mines. And we're already seeing that happen in other places in the state.
Okay, then, yeah, anything else now? Well, thank you very much for the presentation. It was very informative.
Sure.
So,
Again, I
thank you.
really appreciate the opportunity. And if you have any questions, certainly feel free to follow up. I'm available. And again, appreciate y'all looking out for such an important
Yeah.
resource for all of us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mayor Moore,
Yes.
can we have a motion to approve the resolution
Sure.
5A?
Sure.
2023.
Absolutely.
26?
Absolutely. Just going back to 5A, may we have a motion?
I move that we approve resolution number 2023-026.
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so do we have any public comments? Seeing no public comments, we'll close that. Okay. Announcements, board vacancies, Board of Adjustment and Appeals, 2 vacancies for a 3-year term and 1 vacancy for an unexpired term ending September 21st, 2024. And Planning Board, 1 upcoming vacancy for an unexpired term ending September 2025. Meetings and events, we have September 21st at 9:30 a.m., a planning board regular meeting, September 21st at 5:01 p.m. We have a town commission special meeting. It's the public hearing for the budget. And then October 3rd at 1:30, we have another town commission meeting. And there are no board action reports. Item 8, ordinances, there are none. Item 9, consent agenda. There are minutes from 3 meetings. Anybody need discussion on those minutes?
From October, August 15th. On page 10 of our. On page 10 of our agenda minutes, it says that Town Manager Labadie asked Supervisor Link about the St. Lucie Catholic Church polling place. Ms. Link explained that we would use the Spanish River Park. We wouldn't use the park, we would use the Spanish River Library.
Any other changes for the minutes? If not.
No.
If we could have a motion to approve them as amended.
I move that we accept the minutes from the August 15th, 2023 commission meeting, the September 5th, 2023 commission meeting, and the September 5th, 2023 special first public hearing budget meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously.
So that's approving the consent agenda.
Yes.
Got it, got it. Just for the record.
Unfinished business, the fire rescue implementation update.
Yes, as Chief Joseph comes up again, everything's on schedule, on budget, a lot of little details, and we even get a little special fire marshal presentation too, or discussion.
Afternoon, everybody. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. Quick update. On our hiring, we have 3 candidates going through the final background checks. We did the fingerprints and all that came back. But we do a deep dive into their employment history, see if there are any issues we're concerned about, and that's should be on the way this week to get that done. We are scheduling the firefighter driver interviews for later this month in about 2 weeks. So we had started off with 15 candidates. We're down to like 13 or 14. We've got jobs, so they've done. And so we expect to have the 6 candidates that we need from that. So far, from the application, we have promising candidates, so we should be good there. The paramedic interviews will be about the middle of October. Again, we're sending out invites today for those interviews, and we have 39 people who are going to interview. We get 15. So the numbers are looking good on our side. We anticipate getting the candidates we need to be able to move forward with the project. Hydrant testing is coming up October 9th. So around October 9th, we'll have a flyer going out to all the residents, letting them know if you see standing water, don't drive through it, kids, pets, and et cetera, and so on. Just some safety tips to help them navigate that, the testing for Delray's ISO evaluation coming up in January. Fire station report, the 2nd floor last week, Thursday, that's done. We're building up towards the roof level with cinder blocks, so you see it going up very quickly. We should be pouring the beams for the 2nd floor on the office side in a couple of weeks. We're pouring for the beams on the bay side with apparatus kept later on this week. When those beams are poured, let them set, and they put the wire in for the roof itself, pour that. So we should be covering the station. We're thinking by the end of October, early November, we'll be putting a roof on. And there'll be a covering party celebration event. Be more details down the road, but the coffin, one of the traditions is that when they cover the structure, they have a get together, bring all the subcontractors in, all the members of the ownership and the town, and you get to meet and greet, walk through the station, see the, the dirt and where everything's gonna be, and get a good idea of what you purchase. So, that is all I have. You have questions?
When is the top off ceremony?
We don't have a date certain yet. The date is approximately around the end of October, beginning of November. We don't have the exact date yet because they're still working out the logistics. Again, we're gonna get it kind of probably about 2 or 3 weeks notice because again, deliveries, wiring, putting it in, inspections could cause a day or two delay here and there. So as soon as I know, I'll pass it on to the town manager, and he'll help us.
Excellent, very exciting.
No questions?
Thank you.
No.
No.
So the fire marshal is going to talk about this exciting topic of smoke alarms.
Good afternoon, everybody.
And detectors, yes.
Can you hear me? Vice Mayor Stern contacted myself and Chief Joseph in regard to an issue that he spoke to a friend about in his condominium. I don't know if you want to kind of introduce how this came about, but prompted from that conversation, I did a bunch of research and then put the stuff to the town manager's office, and I believe they sent it out to you guys.
I
I
think
was
the
just gonna go-
important thing is you have the information, relates to us and.
Okay.
whoever was-
So at any rate, the Florida Fire Prevention Code requires that smoke alarms be inside and outside of bedrooms and within living spaces of apartments. Condominiums fall into that. That's part of an existing and new condominiums. And that falls under Florida Fire Prevention Code, NFPA 101, the Life Safety Code, section 31. And essentially, the people don't, this is the thing I needed to explain. Smoke alarms and smoke detectors are different. Smoke detectors is part of a building system that activates the building fire alarm system. And in some condominiums or apartment buildings, you may have one of those devices inside your space. Typically, in a sprinkler building, they're going to be in the corridors and the common areas. So you're not going to have smoke detectors necessarily in your unit, but you may. And again, usually it's just one. Smoke alarms are for early detection of smoke within that unit only. It doesn't activate a building-wide system. It's just to alert the occupants of that space that there may be a fire in that unit. The sensitivity of these things is really good. They activate without even visible smoke at times. And certainly the benefit for a couple reasons. A is early, getting people up early and getting them out before there is a bigger problem. If you discover a problem within your unit and can address it prior to a sprinkler head going off, if you have sprinklers in your building, you're going to not only save your unit, you're going to save other units within the building. Because as we know, if we have a sprinkler head activation, they work great, but they also, can tend to cause some damage, collateral damage throughout the building. So this came up, Vice Mayor contacted us because he had understood there was a potential deadline that was coming as to when these had to be in. The deadline actually has been in place, from the Florida Fire Prevention Code's perspective, probably for 3 cycles now is when this kind of was implemented, which translates into 6 to 9 years. And these things are supposed to be in your units right now. If you don't have them, they're supposed to be there by state statute, state code. So that's kind of where we're at. And I could go through the information that I already provided you. If you guys have some questions about that, I could address it. But the next phase was, what are we going to do about it as a town? How do we want to address this for our residents? Because it's truly a safety issue that I think, I know how I handled it when I was in Boca Raton. And we discussed that, myself and Jeff Remus, building official. We were coming up with thoughts and ideas on how to address that. Now, first and foremost, Vice Mayor was concerned that, people didn't know about this. And, so the first step would be to communicate out to the residents and try to make them aware of what the advantages are of this. and then, motivate people as much as we can to just get it done. Secondarily, that we're gonna only be able to contact as, a limited number of people, for a couple of reasons. I mean, we have, a lot of people that are only here part-time in town. And they may not get the messages that we're posting, and they may not be part of our registered system of messaging. A lot of people are doing tenant improvements within their space. This was another way that I addressed it in Boca, that when somebody came in to get a permit for tenant improvement, we would then just kind of add this as a requirement for getting that space approved on the building file. And we go out and do one fire inspection, just make sure the smoke alarms were in. They're supposed to be interconnected, hopefully with hardwire, but we talked about, if that's not really possible, because in some of the older condominiums, putting hardwire alarms in could be very difficult. From my perspective, you can buy the 10-year battery life ones. They have the capability of being Bluetooth. They also have ones, if you're doing some wiring work in a particular space, and this is what Jeff and I were talking about, maybe you put a hardwire one in there, and then in the rest of the space, you go ahead and put the Bluetooth ones in, and they do interconnect, and that would wake everybody up within that unit space. And again, get people motivated to investigate, but more than anything, if they needed to evacuate, get them out early. So those are kind of the plans that we had to try to address this, good communication, and then try to do it through some sort of formal process as people improve their spaces.
If I may, just a comment or two. I did a little investigation in my condominium, and it appears that anybody who's been through a renovation in the last number of years have them. People who have not, do not have them. So that, if that's representative, is a communication would be a major part of
Yes, correct. And
accomplishment here.
when, after I spoke with you and I talked to Jeff about it, Jeff had already gotten ahead of this as far as, moving with, getting spaces that were coming in for some tenant improvement work, having this, because, the building code and the fire code pretty much work hand in hand. The life safety code's a little different. It's a live document that is in a kind of a, I don't want to say a perpetual state of change, but that's reviewed every 3 years and things are updated. And typically because we've experienced, unfortunately, some sort of tragedy within the US that it related to fires that sparks people to want to make some changes to make buildings and places and people safer. And that's kind of where this came from, and that's why I say it was something that was out there probably for the last 20 years and eventually works its way through the systems, through the legislature, and eventually gets, implemented in these types of documents and becomes statutorily required. So that's kind of where we're at. And that's why, again, we were talking about expanding that a little bit as, and trying to grab everybody and get the entire unit done as opposed to just part of the unit where somebody's just doing a partial renovation, say a bathroom or maybe just a bedroom or something like that. We want to make sure the smoke alarms get put in throughout the entire space. So that's kind of where we're at with the conversation right now. And we're working with town management to kind of tighten that up and formulate it and begin that process.
If I may, just add, this is not an expensive proposition. These alarms are $15 to $20 and they are battery operated. So it's not a major issue as far as economically. It's a question of recognition and taking care of it.
Well, I agree with that. The cost of the alarms themselves is not significant, and even to have somebody put them in is not significant. I think based on our demographics, it may be a challenge for some of the people that live here to put them in themselves. So, that's the other thought we had about how do we assist people possibly with getting that done. And again, we're putting our department together. These are aspects of it that we're going to build upon and, and hopefully deliver, this kind of community service in some way. There's places where they have, assistance through the fire service that comes out and helps with people that need assistance putting these things in place. Our overall goal is to, first prevent fires, save people's lives. And then if all else fails, we show up and put the fire out. That's the last thing we want to do. We want to be there well ahead of that, and that's the importance of these things. So, yeah, we're working on a more solid program. We've got some really good ideas, I think. And, we should, be better addressing this as we move through now that we're kind of taking charge of it.
Is there the potential that if you don't have them and they're required, and you have a fire in your unit, your insurance won't cover it?
I don't believe it's so much that way. I can't answer that question with, I haven't heard that of being tied to your insurance. This is more about, safety than it is anything. You may, for example, you may have a fully sprinkled apartment unit, right? I mean, the fire is going to be put out by, or at least kept in control by that sprinkler system. This, but you're not going to wake up till you hear the alarms going off and things have really gone awry. This is for early detection, early warning. It's just a early warning kind of step. I don't know how insurance would be impacted by that. To be honest with you, I don't.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Well, I agree with your approach with what you're working towards. And is that something that you'll bring to us, like whatever you eventually decide as far as your plan, or?
So this kind of follows our incremental compliance kind of process that we use across the board for things when we find this, that over time we'll get everybody on board. We did discuss possibly looking at a grant program. Chief was telling me that there are types of grants that are out there to procure these, and then we can assist with getting them installed for those. We just don't know the scope and scale of the problem, really. So we're just going to do this incrementally. I'm sure as we move forward, this was kind of new to me. I thought everybody had smoke alarms. Maybe that's a little naive on that. I just, it's always been around. But Jeff's been doing this already, so I don't think we're going to get a lot of surprise from contractors saying, why are you making us do this? But there could be. I pushed the group to just keep that in mind, that somebody could be, I'm replacing windows. Why do I have to put in smoke alarms? But as Vice Mayor Stern had indicated, this isn't a huge cost, especially with the newer technologies that the fire marshal was telling us about, that, you could Bluetooth in and just basically you're adhering them to the ceiling. You're not screwing or drilling. It's almost like a glue or a sticker kind of
I've used
two-sided
double-sided
tape. Boom.
Velcro tape.
Yeah.
That's not going to hold up if you have a lot of heat, but the idea of these is that they're going to activate well before you have that heat, that high level of heat in the unit.
But yeah, we'll keep you informed as we go forward. This was a kind of a newer issue. Thank you, Vice Mayor, for bringing this to our attention, and we'll move through this issue.
Is it currently covered in our ordinances?
Yes, the
Mandate to
as we
have,
adopted the Florida Fire Prevention
Yeah.
Code within our ordinance, it is part of
it is there.
our ordinance.
All right.
Via that.
And is there a penalty associated with it for failure to comply?
Yeah, we're gonna kick you out of your unit. No,
No, I wonder if currently, I'm not advocating. I mean, I think it'd be wonderful if there would be a grant that we could actually, but again, you have to determine if the grant is available, what the volume we need. And then the question I have is personnel. You had suggested that in addition to distributing information, notice and information and to inform the public,
Mhm.
that there actually be assistance in helping them.
We'll have to see
install.
how that progresses and see, that's, once we, I don't anticipate that really being a helpful situation until we're 6 months plus in business and we see, how, what the effect of call volume and all those types of things are on the department. Or, if we want to do something, there's a lot of different ways we could try to help people. Those are things we got to still work through.
Is there the potential for us to go through condo units and check the sprinklers, those that have sprinkler systems? Because very often systems that are 40 years old, some of your heads are not working anymore for a variety of reasons. They got bent, they got painted over, they got whatever. And that also is fire is a safety issue. If we would go in and inspect the sprinkler systems and let people know from a, not from the perspective of somebody who's looking to do the work, but from an impartial perspective, have them put up fire alarms at the same time.
So the way sprinkler systems are inspected, and yes, each unit should be inspected at a minimum on an annual basis. Typically, they could, for certain parts of the system have to be inspected as often as quarterly. And all buildings that have those systems, the building's required to hire a third party to come in and do those inspections. Part of what we implemented when we adopted the fire code is to require that a third party entity provide those reports back to us. And we are just about to implement that process starting October 1st when our ordinance takes effect. That information would then come into our office. We would be able to evaluate what the deficiencies are, if there is any, and then I could follow up on that. Right now, it's just me. So to be able to do that would be probably not really, I probably wouldn't be able to do that. That doesn't mean I can't visit all the buildings. If I'm getting this data in and I'm getting those reports in that are telling me, what's actually going on in the building. The condominium boards and management by state code, which you guys adopted, are required to have those inspections done. And they're also required to report it. The difficulty is the reporting side. Well, we've now taken steps to make sure that that information does gets reported electronically, and we will have those updates and be able to manage that system much more effectively moving forward.
One of the issues is sometimes these third-party inspectors are also the contractors who want to do the work. And you find that in 3/4 of the units they go in, they find tens of thousands of dollars of work that has to be done.
Well, if they're doing work they shouldn't be doing, that's fraudulent. And there's certain things, I can't prevent certain things happening. What I can do is manage the information that we get in. And verify that, and if need be, go out and verify compliance. If somebody's complaining to me through our office that they feel something that they're being overcharged or there's an issue related to the system, I have in past years gone out and taken a look at that. Keep in mind the fire codes, right, are the minimum requirements. Some buildings are built beyond that. But once they do that, they need to maintain those systems as well. The sprinkler heads are very reliable. They have a 50-year shelf life or 60-year, depending on where they're manufactured. So they don't have to be replaced every 5 years, 10 years. I mean, they really have a long life. And part of the inspection process is to go out and verify they have a date on them, go out and verify what the dates of the sprinkler heads are. There's a lot of information that's there. It's just a matter of receiving that data. And if we see any deficiencies, we then follow up further directly from me. And I mean, I've worked with a lot of these companies. I'm not going to say that there's not bad apples. There's bad apples and everything. But most of these companies I know, I've been, they have a reputation they want to protect as well. And I would say that that's very, very, very infrequent that you would find somebody who's doing something that is not, above board.
Thank you.
And any other questions regarding that? I just wanted to touch on one more issue. Chief Joseph asked me to talk about this briefly. Last week, I went up to the State Fire Marshal's office and the Florida Fire Marshals and Inspectors Association of the state of Florida put on a symposium on lithium-ion batteries. It was held at the State Fire College in Ocala, Florida. It was over 2 days. They had a lot of industry people that came in from, regarding EVs, electric vehicles. So Tesla was there, GM was there. We had a lot of fire officials from around the country that came in that have been dealing with some of these problems related to the batteries, and not just electric vehicles, also scooters, electric bikes, cell phones, I mean, all kinds of things that are powered by lithium ion batteries. I learned a lot because I didn't realize that those electric vehicles are powered, there's the batteries that are in them are the size of a AA battery. They just line up 10,000 of them and put them all in series. So if one of those little cells fails, it creates a cascading problem. That's why when you see electric vehicle fires, it's very difficult. You most likely can't put them out. You can pull them out, let them burn down and just protect exposures as one idea. If you put water on it, you're just gonna cool it down, but it's still gonna burn. They create their own heat, they create their own fuel source. And that's not to say that they're dangerous. It's just that when, if you have something that gets damaged, and the reason this really came up in the state of Florida is after Hurricane Ian, they had a significant number over on the West Coast of car fires the 3 months to 1 year following Ian. Because the batteries themselves corroded over time, and just the breakdown in the batteries, and they do create a lot of energy when they fail. So and same thing with the golf carts, and they have a lot of golf carts over there. In residents' homes and all that stuff. So I'm going to be putting out some information about that through our system, just to kind of give some people some ideas. Don't store your scooters inside the house, inside your unit. We'll look to, when I go out to do the visits to the condominiums, I'm going to be looking to see where they're parking those things and where they are, so we can, offer some ideas on a better place to put them, or, just so that they're, if we have a problem, something does break down and starts a fire, that we have a better way to manage it. So those are just some of the things that were going on.
I read after the hurricane, the cars that were parked on the street and got wet with seawater,
Mhm.
they were catching on fire.
Absolutely.
As soon as someone tried to start it, it was all over.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be starting it. It could just be sitting there and the battery breaks down. Each one of those little cells, when it heats up and starts breaking down, gives off 6 liters of hydrogen, which, if you think about 6 liters of hydrogen gas, and then self-ignites, and then the next one, and it becomes a cascading event. And like I said, when you have 10,000 batteries in there, that's a lot of hydrogen. And there's a lot of carbon monoxide that's given off as well. And that's carbon monoxide, while it's a toxic gas, it's also a flammable gas. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So they ended up, there was an interesting picture that they showed us of all the cars that had gotten water damage, like regular cars, with the gasoline engines in them. And they put them on this big giant lot, and they were all lined up together, like right next to each other, no space between them. And they just left them there. The EV lot they had was in an open field. All the cars were a minimum of 20 feet apart. And, and there was a fraction of the cars, and they needed the equal amount of space, because they can't line them up next to each other. You got to keep them separated so that they don't create a cascading event. And
So then the pictures we see online where you have a line of electric cars and one catches on fire, and very quickly they're all on fire. Is that, you're saying that's true?
well, that would be true with the regular car as well. If they're lined up next to each other, it's just the impact is significantly different.
Thank you.
Any other questions about anything? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
The electric scooters that use lithium batteries.
Mhm.
Is it unsafe to have them in apartments?
I would not have one in my apartment. So. I'll tell you, one video that they showed us. This was China. A gentleman got on an elevator with one of the electric scooters, and when the scooter or one of those batteries breaks down, it happens in a matter of seconds. It discharges a white gassy cloud, just one battery within that space, and ignites within seconds. There were 4 other people in the elevator, including a woman who was carrying a baby. The elevator door closes, this discharges the gas, and almost immediately there's fire. And, typical elevator that has a camera in there. I mean, they broke away from it at that point, but I mean, I don't need to tell you how horrific, this was. And those are the types of things that they showed us another video of someone just had a scooter laying against the wall in their home, single family home. Similar thing happened. They got out because, it didn't block their egress, but it happens like in seconds. It's not a gradual thing. So I would not have one of those. And if you think about scooters, right, that the kids, they ride them, they throw them around. I mean, the likelihood of a battery getting damaged is much higher than a car. Why what happens, electric cars get damaged because they get in a car accident. Or because we have a major incident like the Hurricane Ian where they get impacted by salt water. So that's kind of a different thing, but the electric bikes, all the, those. So I would be very careful about that. And, it seems really innocent. But they're, but if you have smoke alarms,
You're good.
You're alerted.
Thank you.
Does it pick up hydrogen gas?
no, they do not have gas detectors, but you can get carbon monoxide detectors.
There you go. There we go. Make sure you have one of those then.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to item B, Florida Department of Transportation, R project update.
I reached out to Brad at FDOT. There is no updates or changes. They're moving to they're looking still to let the project in December. But they did not have a date for a meeting, but they know that they're planning one, so.
Okay, next, item C, Building Department Recertification Program update.
Commission, how are you today?
Good.
Not a whole lot of changes from last time that we were here, but we're going to be moving forward with a few things. First of all, we still have one building, and we're not going by developments or associations, we're going by buildings. Of the 53 buildings, we still have one who has completed the program and is finished. We have one that has submitted all their reports and they were approved, and they are moving forward with hopefully starting their restoration soon, as they are on a time limit. We have 4 buildings that have submitted stuff, but it's only partial, missing electrical, missing structural, missing electrical, so on and so forth. We have 7 buildings now that have submitted everything, and we are slowly reviewing them and letting them know where they're at with that. And at this time, I'm going to exclude 2 of the 7 because they are undergoing the restoration process. They just haven't done the electrical yet. We have 5 buildings right now that we're going to be triple checking our emails and looking at everything because we've already sent notification, we've called them. So we have 5 that we're going to move forward with code cases with. All right, that just have no compliance whatsoever. One of the biggest that we have is we have 13 buildings, which is about 25% of everything that has submitted for an extension and was granted an extension. So about a quarter of the buildings are saying, hey, we need more time. All right. And we still have about 28.3, about 28% that letters were sent, but they are still within their due date. So they're just not due yet at this time. And that's about it. But right now, that 13% with those buildings that haven't complied at all, haven't reached out to us, that we've called, reminded them, we're going to triple check on our end that we didn't miss something. And we're going to move forward with code cases against those 5 buildings. And that's it.
I'm assuming that the recertification doesn't occur on the filing of the initial reports, but on the filing of the end report when all the work is done.
That is correct. So the phase 1 report is the visual inspection, say, hey, this is what we found, structural and electrical. And then phase 2 is typically done during the construction process when you're doing your restoration. And then at the end of that, when we close out that permit, then you get paperwork from the engineer saying, okay, we're done and you're good to go. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you for the update.
You
Yeah, hopefully. they'll comply. Okay, so moving on to new business, item A, discussion.
Could is the gentleman in the back of the room, are you for 3521 South Ocean? Is this, I know I missed this, so I'll put this on me. Is there any way we can move those two permit items up before we get into the Milani in ballot questions? Because that's going to be about an hour of discussion, I'm guessing.
Okay, yeah.
Is that possible? Do we just need to do a quick, just real quickly, just move those two items up for, okay. If that's possible to do, if the commission's
Do we
okay.
need a motion on that?
We already amended the agenda.
You could just do a quick motion to reorder the agenda to allow those two items to move up.
I move that we agree to amend the
New business.
agenda again to move resolution number 2023-016 to, from item D under new business to before item A under new business.
We also need to move C, item
So we're,
C.
so we're moving up 11C and D, which is the right of way permit and the FDOT component, right? So we'll make 11C and D now A and B and move everything down.
Okay.
And I apologize, moving forward, Linelda and I will be sure that if we have petitioners, we pull them up a little bit earlier in the process.
Do we have a second? Somebody want to second the motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Good afternoon. For the record, Ingrid Allen, Town Planner. So this item before you is a request for a town right-of-way permit. We do have a regulation in the code that if you're doing certain improvements in the right-of-way, you trigger a town right-of-way permit. In addition, there was a resolution that was approved in 2021, which requires any town right-of-way permits that are located on State Road A1A, that they require town commission approval, which is why this item is before you today. I've noted on page 85 of your packets that the town approval for town right-of-way permits, again, that are located on State Road A1A, will be applicable until the FDOT's RRR project is approved, right? Or completed, I should say. And then once that project is completed, these types of town right-of-way permits will be reviewed and approved by staff administratively. So the request, again, is specifically for the driveway. I've noted that back on July 13th of 2023, the property owner or their authorized agent got an approval from the planning board for a new 3-story, 3,997 square foot single family residence. There's currently a home on the property. There's currently a driveway on the property. Obviously, they're demolishing the home and they're going to change the driveway. The configuration of the driveway will be different. I've attached to your memorandum here, the FDOT permit. The authorized agent for their property owners here, pretty straightforward. I'll be happy to address any questions that you might have.
Point of information only. How
Yeah.
wide is this property?
Let me check the, let's see, the survey here. It's not very wide. Mark, do you know the width? Is it 80, if I remember? I can look, I gotta find it through the survey, if you bear with me for a moment. No, it's not on the, I think it's on the survey. Gotta be.
The reason I'm asking is we had this issue with the Troyani property that was not 80 feet wide.
Right, well, this property, again, this item is separate, but this property, right, it didn't meet the initial width requirement. Yeah, it's 60 feet. I thought it was either 60 or 80. However, because there's an existing home, the code is very clear that if you have an existing home, and I did verify this with the town attorney, then you could go ahead and build so long as you're doing a permitted use. So they didn't necessarily need a variance. They already have an existing home and they can redevelop it without getting a variance for that lot width. The Troyanos is a completely different thing. They're trying to create a new parcel. And when you create a new parcel, the code is very clear that you can't create a non-conforming parcel. This is completely two different situations.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Well, the purpose for you coming before us is so that you're very much aware of the Department of Transportation upcoming R project. And so that's why we have the commission expressly approve it. You come. So,
Now you did it.
Sorry about that. I'm the authorized agent, also the licensed architect of record on the project, and I'm the one who's been communicating with FDOT throughout the process for permitting. So yes,
Okay.
this is
you're well aware.
what
Okay.
I'm able to. We've been in communication with FDOT. Our landscape architect has worked closely with them. I've communicated with the owners. Everything's in sync.
Okay, great. Well, it looks like a beautiful project. And so really excited to see that come to fruition.
Can you please state your name on the record, please?
Sure. My name is Mark Hunley. I'm one of the majority partners at Charette International Architecture, which is the firm that's handling the project, and I'll be the architect of record from our firm on that project.
And you are making sure that the drainage issues. are
The
going-
drainage will be 10 times better than what it is now, because right now the driveway basically comes directly up from A1A. We're going to be creating a parking area, horizontal drainage, trench, et cetera, exfiltration.
Perfect.
It will be 10 times better than it is currently.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's excellent news.
Yeah, the
That's great.
drainage plan is part of the site plan approval. Again, that was already approved by the planning board and reviewed by the town's drainage consultant.
Great. Well, if there's no further discussion, we could have a motion, please. Oh, any public comments? Any public comments? Nobody's here. Seems like-
So the only part we really need to approve is the resolution.
Town
Because
right
it-
away permit.
Right. So the
Okay, do we have a resolution number for that?
There's no resolution number, it's just a town right away permit.
I move that we approve the right-of-way permit for 3521 South Ocean Boulevard.
Second that.
all in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. And do we also need a motion for the resolution as well?
That one.
Okay.
got the number for.
So go ahead.
I move that we approve resolution number 2023-016. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Okay. Thank you very much for coming today. Oh, yeah, yeah, sure. Thanks. Okay. So moving along to the discussion of proposed referendum questions for the March 2024 election.
So as you guys commence your discussion, I've given you some information that was requested. That's from David. That would relate to two of the possible referendum questions. The first with that being the $350,000 adjusted since its adoption based on the rate of inflation each year. And we did it one at the national average, and then you'll see another number, which is our what is that called? Our MSA, which is the Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach number. So you can see it's significantly bigger when you use the local multiplier where we procure all of our products. And then the latter sheets in that also show you the adjustment made to the mayor's salary since its adoption and the commissioner salaries at the two indices, one being the national CPI, the other being the South Florida MSA CPI. So those just give you some reference how things have changed over time. Those things were requested. Thank you.
So I guess I'd suggest we go through each referendum item as presented on page 28, if that's okay.
Yes.
So the the first referendum item has to do with the funding and implementation of the sanitary sewer lining project. And specifically, it states that asking if we could have approval for a project to address the sanitary sewer lining. And we have a specific cost of 3.5 million. So is that based on?
That's
what
our
is that
best
based on?
estimate. Going back at how things happen with the fire station, you know, we may, if you're comfortable moving forward with a capital request for the sewer lining project, we will take a slightly deeper dive with the final numbers and see if we should adjust that upwards, say 500,000 to a $4 million project. Right now, the last set of bids that came in, say a year and a half ago, Skender, about-ish, 12 months, about 12 to 15 months ago, was around 2.3 million. So we added $1.2 million for the same project, figuring it's going to take some time securing the loans through the SRF. So we moved it up to 3.5. If the commission is interested in this project, we'll take one last stop and check with the engineer of record and say, can we do this? And will this number hold for a 2-year, period? But right now we're comfortable. Staff is at 3.5 million for the project.
Okay.
Now, that was my only concern, was that if it takes a couple of years to get bids out and decide and contracts, and by the time you're ready to put your shovel in, this is not going to be enough money.
I mean, yeah, we could take a precautionary direction too and go with even a larger number because we're using a not to exceed. It doesn't mean we have to spend all of it, but not to exceed a number, because if we get to that not to exceed number, then we would then have to return unless we could supplement significantly with an appropriation of some sort or an earmark that's outside the context of ad valorem dollars. So, yeah, that's something, if we agree that the project needs to happen, and I would say of all the projects we have, this is a pretty needed project. It's clay pipes. We have some old cast. We've got some cracks, some breaks. We're paying to treat salt water. We get some I&I. That's not good stuff to have going on. We're okay. But we're at the life of the piping system. So we should be starting to look at it. And if the commission was to look at adjustments in the latter question to move, I know Vice Mayor and I had this conversation, even if you move up that 350 to a more palatable number, I still don't think we get to the number for this project. So this would be kind of a standalone project on its own feet. Yep.
And this is a lining project, not a taking out and replacing project.
There'll be the project we had 2 elements that needed to be completely removed and reinstalled. I know that we were looking at seeing maybe moving forward with some of that to see if we move that ahead of the project, but there could be over that time frame, something does, again, if it's a significant enough break, we're going to fix it as an emergency up to that point. But if we're going through and a manhole is totally fractured or broken, we may undertake it as part of the project to just physically remove and replace something if it's necessary. Those are kind of the contingencies that we have generally baked around. About 20% of that construction is an oh no scenario that, much as we televised and looked at everything, it's better maybe that we can't line it because it's too plugged or we can't clean it enough to get the lining to hold. So,
Yeah, also relining is a lot less disruptive.
oh, it's
than
a heck of a
digging
lot.
up and
Yeah.
replace.
And the duration, the life cycle, the product is great. Up north at my last community, we did that and it worked quite well. We didn't have to tear up streets and right of ways, front yards. We just went from structure to structure and lined it. So it worked pretty well.
Thank you.
And I think it's important.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Basically, do we still call it sewer lining project or sewer line project? There's gonna be some repairs.
Lining.
Okay.
I think with counselor, unless you're telling me I can't, there's a certain threshold somewhere in there that if something was needing to be replaced, that the language would have to be warrant
because-
something, yeah.
Because you have the language that says to help repair and prevent. So you're already saying repair and prevent. You could say repair, replace and prevent if you wanted to be overly cautious after the word lining. But that's a term of art to me, lining. But in your world, it means something.
And again, this is design. This is a shovel-ready project. We have it, all the engineering's done. We've incurred that cost. If we wanted, we could re-incur it, but I look at the mayor and she's like, we're not borrowing money to pay for something we already paid for. So, you know, we wouldn't do that part of it, but we have a project that's ready to go.
But do we need to add the replace in case we need to replace?
We could.
something?
It might,
Is
it
that-
might be safe, you know, if
Yeah.
precautionary and again, as we'll get into this and the others, the concern is with the limitation now placed by statute. You know, this project's gonna have to stand alone a little bit. We can have people come in and talk about it, but we can't directly educate the public. So I'm hoping a sewer lining project that the Coastal Star is gonna talk about how important it is. Thank you, Rich. Will help, you know, this project this shouldn't be too controversial for this community to recognize, you know, to flush a toilet, you need a sewer line. Sewer lining project, sewer, you know, distribution system,
So just,
collection system.
Sorry, how does this differ from a pipe lining project in a condo from lining all the pipes?
It's very similar, just on a grander scale. The polymers are gonna probably be a little bit more robust to go inside and hold a 16-inch pipe capacity. It's gonna be a stronger type of polymer than say a 2-inch vertical rise or a 3-inch vertical rise over 10 stories. When we're talking 800 feet a run, you know, we're gonna have to line that whole thing.
My comment would be just going through a whole pipelining project in our condo. There were rare instances where the pipe had to be replaced and couldn't be lined. So I think the wording in there is
Sure, okay.
appropriate.
And again, like I said, there could be times where that happens. It's hard to exactly tell. That the engineers we're confident that most of this could be lined outside of those two spots where we say you can't really line it. You're gonna have to replace the pipe. But
We're going through it and we're almost finished. And it has taken well over a year. And the difference is one is vertical and the other is horizontal.
See, it really all depends on how straight the lines are. There are instances where, like in a condo, you come to a certain floor level and it goes to the side and then up again.
Yes,
So that's where you run into the
yeah,
issues.
but also, you're right. There were places that they broke. Or there were places that they had to actually go in and redo connections. So, yeah, I could see where that would wind up happening. Maybe we use and/or language in there.
I was gonna say which is to help repair, replace and prevent.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
then,
that works.
Since we're talking about words, we want the word help, take the
Mhm.
word help out. I mean, is it to help repair or is it to repair, replace and prevent?
two,
oh, yeah,
Two.
remove the
Help
word.
out.
they can help out. Yeah.
I would suggest that we move the verbiage that the money, that it read, shall the town of Highland Beach be authorized to finance and implement a townwide sanitary sewer lining project to repair, replace, and prevent structural damages to the sewer lines for a not to exceed cost of, et cetera.
Got that?
Rewrite it. but
Yeah,
Everybody
yes.
likes that. Okay.
Mhm.
I like it.
And I mean, I'd be in favor, if we're concerned, I don't know, 4 million, should we just round it up to 4 million?
I would move it up to 4 million.
Or 3.9.
I think under 4. I mean, it's an estimate.
Yeah. I mean,
Under
we're still
4.
gonna go for appropriation dollars again,
Yeah,
right?
We're still gonna work through this. And again, what they'll try to do on sewer project like this, if they're not gonna give us the money, which is good when you have a consultant like the one we have and some ins with Representative Gossett Sideman, is we can be moved up in the SRF process and get some preferential treatment and recognize the need and assistance. And those programs are great. You know, you're talking 1.5% loans. You can't get better money than that. And it's over a 30-year period. So the cost of implementation and finance is really low. And some of the programs now, they forgive certain components of those costs too. So which is nice.
And
Correct.
wasn't there discussion at a last session, excuse me, by the lobbyists, that this would,
Yeah, it's be a good, be a
this
good.
would fit in to the, that,
Yeah, this is our number one.
yeah,
our
that number
best
one and the
option.
funding, it may be there.
It may not be
fit in.
this session, it may be a follow-up session because we can't ask for what we're not authorized to match because the match of some sort would exceed our spending authorization currently.
And I
So-
think, go ahead.
I'm sorry, so I would say 3.9.
It could be close.
Oh,
We'll,
I mean,
we'll leave,
I'd
we'll
make
let
it
the
on the-
consultants, handle
Yeah.
that piece of it. Yeah,
Because by the time the session ends, the referendum will have occurred.
true.
So
true.
you might as well, I talked to the lobbyists, but why not put the ask out there? Because the referendum's in March and by the time the session is done and it gets on the governor's desk, it should be.
Well, they're not really worried about a referendum. I'm just saying we should worry about it just a little bit.
But I think one component of it was whether or not you had community support. And if it passed, we could definitely show strong community support. So I think that would be helpful as well.
I'm going to read back what I
Mhm.
got to make sure this is what we got. Shall the town of Highland Beach be authorized to finance and implement a townwide sanitary sewer lining project to repair, replace and prevent structural damage, not the, I forgot the S, damage to the sewer lines for a not to exceed cost of $4 million. And my only other question is before the word sewer line at the end, you want to say to the town's sewer lines? Or is that pretty self-evident? We're talking about the town's sewer lines. It is say townwide, so I didn't think we needed it. That's why I kind of had notes to myself asking these questions.
So I would suggest a number under 4.
That's why I said 3.9.
3.975.
No, 3.9. Well,
So,
Could we-
can you expand on what's the benefit of?
yes,
this
you
number?
would, I mean, it's, well, maybe a marketing. We don't know, a finite number. We're estimating 3.5, but it was a concern legitimate that by the time we do it, the cost will increase. We don't know if that would be 4. So we tend to pick a round number, but I think for the public, everything is 399, you market a real estate. I just think it may be a little more palatable. It's just,
I'd
a
be
suggestion.
concerned that the 3.9 conveys a higher level of precision than we really have. Like, to me, 4 million is just a more roundabout number. If we were to say 3.9, does it imply a better level of precise estimate of the cost than, say, 4 million? I mean,
yeah,
I mean, it doesn't. I mean,
And I think
I'm not.
Marshall was going to talk to the engineer again and get his most up-to-date guesstimate. So I'm
If-
assuming you like this back
if-
next meeting to.
Well,
one
we're,
last time.
again, the process, I mean, that's something we could come back and revisit and we have the time to, what would be important to note is we have to do this via ordinance. So there's going to be 2 reads of the ordinance by which we have 2 more public hearings or more if it gets kicked down or postponed to make any tweaks. So if we want to pick a number, we can always come back to it if we leave here and are like, we could change it, but we could change it again over the next 45 days, 2 or 3 more times. So you guys tell us what you want. One, do you think this is worthy to move forward? If it is, then we will put this draft language together, come together for the first read of the ordinance with whatever number we settle on today. And then we have those 2 reads before it's effectuated and we could tweak it there.
Maybe each of us could comment whether or not we think we should move this forward and what number we should put on it at this point. So go ahead.
we
Commissioner Bolt.
should move this project forward. It's a priority. And I would suggest a number under 4 million.
Absolutely, we need to approve this. Whether it's under 4 or 4. You're talking about $100,000 on what could be a $4 million project. I think it's nitpicking and I'll go along with whatever the majority wants.
I concur.
I agree. So maybe we'll just leave it at 3.5 until they come back and then because we can change it all the way up until December, right?
Mhm.
Like as you get more information. So
Until
we'll,
until you approve the second read, we're good.
okay. So we have plenty of
fine.
time to fine tune it.
Got
So
6
your,
weeks.
your comment is well noted.
But yeah, but this is just
The clerk's yelling at me.
preliminary reading. It's not ordinance reading. It's just discussion reading. So we can leave that number fungible.
So 3.5 for now.
For now.
Leave it
And then we'll.
and
get
we'll
more
come back
information.
to it.
So it is the desire of the commission at 3.5 to bring this back for a first read.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, the next item has to do with funding limits.
Can I take that?
Go ahead.
First of all, thank you, David, for getting information so quickly back, because I thought we needed some more detailed information to come up with a proposal. And basically, what I am putting on the table is to put a fixed amount of increasing the spending limit to $900,000, which is in line with the MSA CP index. I mean, in other words, it would be the same dollars as when this ordinance was put in place to now. And in addition to that, have an increase by the CPA index going forward. In other words, if the CPA increases 3%, the following year will go up 3%. That's what I'm gonna put on the table for discussion.
And I also wanted to bring up, I think there was also another issue that the public raised when this came up last time. And I don't know that I fully grasped exactly the concern, but it was something to the effect of if the commission were, the way that it's worded now, if all we did was update the number, that there was a concern that the commission could approve multiple projects at that number. And so I suggest that we at least discuss that concern and maybe think about how we can address it. And I don't know if, when I was looking at the charter, the way, and so I'm not, I must say, I did not quite fully understand, and maybe Commissioner Goldberg, you said, yeah, you said you remember, so maybe you could further expand on that. I'm not exactly sure what would address that concern, but when I looked at revisited the charter itself, I wasn't sure if it was it says, allocation of more than $300,000 in any given fiscal year. I wasn't sure if that was part of it. It starts off saying any single project or accumulation of projects or extension of town services requiring an allocation of more than 350,000 in any given fiscal year shall not, whatever. So I don't know, do you remember, Commissioner David, that concern and what,
Well,
and
What I saw as the concern was more the lack of a specific number. And we were putting in a percentage of the budget. And people didn't like the idea that it was a percentage of the budget. Now, we can approve any project we need to do or we feel needs to be done for $350,000. We're not limited to one a year. And if we limit it to one a year or two a year or three a year, I don't know what we're doing, because that makes absolutely no sense to me. If something needs to be done, it needs to be done. And it doesn't mean that we spend $350,000 on everything we do. But if we should need to, we have to have the ability to do it without having to go back for a referendum every time you have a project that needs to be done, particularly the way costs are going. 2 years from now, 900 may not be enough to do a lot of the projects we need to do. So I definitely wouldn't limit it to in any given year. I would limit it more to any one project in any given year.
Commissioner Goldberg, do you remember that concern that was raised and how we would address it?
What I recall is they thought that it would be for each amount, not just the entire year. They were concerned that so much was being spent. It was a confusion. So we have to clarify, what do we need? Whether it's 900 or 350. Is it per purchase, per item? Is it an annual sum? For certain projects?
I think it was intended to be per project, is my understanding, but there was something that there was a lot of discussion about that what was being proposed
Yeah,
was
so.
not accomplishing that, and I.
So I remember some of the conversations with those that really expressed that pretty clearly to me at a few public meetings was that, oh, we'll plan for the project in one fiscal year, we'll finish it in the next fiscal year. It's the same project, but we're splitting on. No, we're not doing that because it says project or similar group of similar projects. So it keeps you from breaking the project apart. So think the sewer project, since we're on that conversation. We're gonna do $350,000 every year for the same project until it's done. You could argue, and I think you would do quite well to say that's the same project. You've just broken it up over 5 years. So the idea is if you know it's the same project, you're just doing it over a longer period to get around the 350 cap. You're not supposed to do that. That's what you're going to go to the residents like we have to, regardless of this conversation. We know we need to ask for the sewer project because it's just that much bigger, that more significant. But it is for a single or group of like projects. So you don't break it up over fiscals because people thought, oh, that's all you'll do is if it's 10% of the operating budget, it'll move with how the property goes. It was going to be like $1.2 million, $1.3 million per project. You break the project, you could do 2.6. I was like, we're not doing that. And then those that mistrust government, no matter what I say or what is said up here, are going to have this inherent mistrust, no matter how we do this, how we write it. They're just not going to believe it. So I think that's where we came back with this. If we keep it as simple, my advice, you tell me what you want to do, is I wouldn't change the entire language of that provision in the charter. I would just fix the number. Whether or not you decide to adjust the number annually for the consumer price index, or some of them do, CPI or 3%, whatever is lower or whatever, yada, 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 or whatever, but I would just keep the number, because if we try to change the language, then the argument goes not from just the numbers, it goes to the language in the implied meaning. And we have no means to reach out to the public to try to counter misunderstandings, if you will, right? We're just not going to have that ability. We can invite folks in. I just don't see a lot of people coming. They're just going to make that own interpretation. So if you keep it the same and just say 350 to 900, adjusted at CPI, or 350 to 900, that's it.
I would have the adjustment in, otherwise you're just pushing this down the road for the same problem to come up, which makes absolutely no sense to me at all. Why would you push it and have it happen again?
Well,
I think I'm looking for, well, from a staff perspective, any improvement is a definite help. So whatever that might look like, but again, your community, how do you want them to manage this moving forward? If you want it to adjust, everybody in the room will nod their head, like, makes sense. You adjust the dollar changes over time, you adjust it over time.
I don't want to have future commissions have their hands tied the way we have, which makes it very difficult to do a lot of things that really need to be done. And it's not an open-ended thing, because if, as I understand it, if we have to go out and get to issue bonds, or we have to go out for loans, you still have to go and get
Voter approval.
voter approval. So
Right.
you can't just go all over the place with this.
Right.
The state has limits on us as well.
And your budget presents limits, and
Yeah.
if somebody was to extrapolate, oh, you could do all these projects, well, then we'd be raising taxes for which nobody up here would last very long. So those things still apply, but it's hard to communicate that message. But that's really the truth of it, is other statutes protect the community and residents from what they may perceive as a rogue group just trying to do these random projects, because you have to secure public approval for financing. And we've already used the non-ad valorem side for the fire station. So we don't have anything left without going to the residents to borrow. So.
And then regarding the wording, it says, I guess I'm just curious about why it's worded, or maybe we should just change it, but it has the word parks in there. I mean, we,
Okay, yeah, if I
That-
could throw in something to follow up on Marshall
Sure,
was saying,
yeah.
and obviously I understand and support that concept that you just talked about of let's fix the problem for real and for good. Unfortunately, I think we're, as a staff, been burned with the last couple of times voters didn't do that, and I think it's almost like half a loaf is better than none. You can get to 900,000 or 950, it's a lot better than 350. And listening to Marshall just now, maybe something really simple like this. Shall the restriction on the town's ability to fund projects to $250,000 set forth in this charter be increased to blank? Very simple, very straightforward. We're not talking about sewers or parks or anything else. Because you just said resonated with me, like the last time simplicity seemed to be the key. And it seemed like it was too complicated. So we strip it down to its barest basics, 350, this number, and have the language as clean as we can without putting anything else. Now, I say that the other side of me says, oh, it's great to explain to people why we're doing it. But we've had a couple of shots at explaining it and didn't succeed. So maybe the simplest version is the best version. The lawyer just say that.
Yeah.
Um,
I would agree with that.
To be disbarred.
But I think, I think it's also important that people understand that it's in the same amount in today's dollars. That resonates, that we're really not, asking for more than what we asked for when this charter was done in today's dollars.
That's a good point.
So I would keep, if that was to play, I would keep the 350 and say to be adjusted. But by inflation over the last 30 years or something like that
Yes.
to this number.
Yes,
So it
adjusted
recognizes that
for
we're
inflation.
adjusting it by inflation. Or the price, consumer price index. You could do something more specific. That's how we adjusted the number. We're not picking, we just said, what's that number now? It would be this number. And then you could say and expand to it, and then to continue adjusting the number. So it's clean, it's simple, it doesn't pass it on to future commissions, like, here it is.
Yes.
But is
So
that
we
in
would
the
strike-
ballot or is that an explanation?
We don't get a chance to just.
Well,
I'm-
well, in these public meetings, you can explain it.
No one's coming.
No, but I think that's very good. Simple is important, but also it's explaining why. If we explain that the funding limit, which has been for 30 years, 350, adjusted for inflation to today's needed
Whatever, yeah.
funding of 900.
And then we would not mention the stormwater stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because I don't think we need all that.
Because then people will be,
Yeah.
what park?
Yeah.
You say
exactly.
parks, that's it, we're done, we're done.
Yeah, no, I'm in favor of that. Yeah. Yeah, the amount, I mean, I can definitely see the 900. I guess the only thing I would say is the scope of services that we have since that 1991 has expanded. I think that was one reason why we wanted more than just the inflationary number. I just toss that out there. I mean, after going through it, anything is better than nothing.
Yeah.
So I definitely want an improvement, but I'll point that out that the scope of services is much more than what we had in 1991. And so if you would adjust it for that, we would be over.
And I think we would address, and again, I would be summarizing the counterpoint group that said, pick a number. They kept on saying, just pick a number and work that versus something so complicated. So we are picking a number, a rationalized number, adjusted the rate of inflation, but we're picking a number that is just, we're not making it tied to a budget that changes, it rationalizes just adjusting the number to today. Next, that's what they asked for instead. If they would have done that, I believe there was a communication that says if they would just do this, we would support it, but we didn't. We pushed on based on our rationality, which made a lot of sense, but it just didn't sit well with others. Now if we use their rationality, would they be coming back the other? I mean, so we kind of addressed that comment and said, okay, the spirit of compromise is there and we'll get there,
It seems reasonable, rational, that everyone it has every day experiences the cost of inflation, certainly over 30 years. It's apparent that it would be 3 times the number, almost 3 times the number. So if we give them that very simply, just to keep the cost of inflation, CPI, then it makes sense. Mhm.
I'm gonna try it, see how this sounds. I'm writing as you're talking. Shall the restriction on the town's ability to fund projects to the original 1991 limit of $350,000 set forth in the charter, section 201, be increased to $900,000, which is the approximate increase in the consumer price increase in the consumer price index since 1991. I'm saying 1991 twice.
You don't have
Yeah,
to
do
put
we have
that
to
in.
say all that?
You don't have to put those last two
And what
words.
that's missing is the discussion of whether we want to have a 3% going forward.
Or the
That has
CPI
to be
rate?
approved.
And I was just struggling with how do you say CPI twice? You're telling the people on the front end that went from 350 to 900 because of the CPI.
Right, we're
And
asking
then-
not, but in
and
the
then
future,
and we'll-
it'll increase by 3. No.
And will increase by the CPI annually, something like that.
Mhm.
Is that kind of sort of what we're looking for? I mean, we'll play with this some more, but is that the gist of?
Agree with me.
I believe it is.
Yeah, I think the higher limit and that it would adjust on an annual basis going forward. I think
Oh,
that's the key.
Yeah, adjusted for inflation at 3%.
Going, well, CPI.
Yes,
The
adjusted
index,
CPI.
The index.
Put
Yeah.
put
Going
down
forward.
MSA CPI because there are different CPIs.
Well, is Joe Public gonna be misled when you say MSA? They go, what the heck is that? Is that the Marshall retirement fund?
Do we have to specify that, Counselor? In a ballot question, just that we want to adjust it by consumer price index? Do you have to
Well.
pick the MSA or just say the consumer
Well,
price?
there's Kind of two things, it's the ballot title and then there's kind of the meat of it, so the meat can be a little more substantive, the ordinance language in the ballot can be a little more meat on those bones, but the ballot has to fairly reflect. I think you could say CPI, consumer price index, and then in the actual language explain.
So you're adjusting the funding limit to account for 30 years of inflation, right? So you're gonna adjust to account for 30 years of inflation to 900,000 and then to increase based on CPI moving forward on an annual basis on every October 1st.
How
And you-
about local CPI?
Yeah, I was gonna say regional or
If
local.
we,
Yeah, something like that, regional.
if
CPI.
we limit.
That word's.
What is,
Regional CPI.
Regional.
what is the
That's the
regional, the MSA?
Yeah.
Yes. But
Mhm.
right. Because you have to identify which
Maybe we say
CPI.
regional parens MSA.
Sure. But try that
I
now.
know, we got lots of scrap
Yeah.
papers are figuring this out.
Come on, Scrivener, you got this.
All right, do we like the word, first, if you like the word restriction or limitation in the beginning, shall the restriction, shall the limitation, which is a better word?
I would say limitation, because some people don't think that's a restriction, so I put
But
limitation.
Shouldn't it be funding limitation?
Yeah.
Not
Funding
just
limit.
limitation,
Well,
the funding.
shall
limit.
the fund, shall the limitation on the town's ability to fund projects?
No,
That's where the
that's
funding
that's
is.
wordy.
But you like,
Parse that down.
less, okay, shall the
Less.
town's limitate, funding limitation?
I mean, I
Of
think it should be funding
350,000.
limitation.
Be adjusted to account for 30 years of inflation and set at $900,000 and adjusted annually based on the regional CPI every October 1st.
Actually, I think it's January 1st of the CPI date.
We can
But
pick
we-
October 1 date. Oh, David's gonna get us all confused now. Bureau of Labor Statistics,
No,
serial number
uh,
5578382.
It's not on the top. You will note, and again, in the details, we can identify a specific metropolitan statistical area, MSA. And the MSA that we belong to is the Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, which over the last 30 years has exceeded the national average, right? So yeah, so we can input the exact number. There's a key identifier that the Bureau of Labor and Statistics provides. We can look at it. I would suggest that we look at it every June so that we can then prepare for our budgets, right, in
Yes.
July and August and September. So what we do is, right, they'll come out, they do it every month, and they'll come out with the June figure. We'll compare that to the previous one. Historically, it's been about 3% every year. And maybe in the more details, I've seen others that say that, it won't exceed 5%, in any single year, but again, we'll work with legal. We can identify the specific one. I love the idea of putting the language in there that says we're just adjusting the $350,000 to today's value. You know, it makes sense, right? You can't buy anything. You know, my first house was $96,000, right? And so, and today it's quadruple that, but yeah, so.
I don't know, but I think we're all in favor of this. Do we each want to say something? about it,
Yes,
or is it- go
in
ahead.
favor of it.
In favor, and as it is, the 900 adjusting by. CPI.
Yes.
So good.
Yes.
So we'll come back with language. Again, we have 2 times to play with it. Keeping it simple, stupid,
try-
right?
try-
We're gonna,
let's
that's
try
what we're
one.
gonna do. We're gonna keep this thing simple, right on point. Less words is more,
Let's
more
try it-
exact
Let's
language.
try it again.
Oh, he's got it.
Well,
All
all right,
right.
we'll see. Shall the funding limitation of $350,000 set forth in the charter section 201 be adjusted to $900,000 to account for the past 32 years of inflation? And, which I'm still not clear, and annually increased by the Regional Friends MSA Consumer Price Index. I think you have to tell people what index is. So the annual consumer price index.
Yeah, we can look at it. and
But is
the
that?
words-
is
Yeah,
that-
the
am I-
annual
am I getting
CPI.
closer and closer to the guts of what you're trying?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mr. Marshall.
yep, bang,
I got the okay from Marshall.
bang. I got it. I know where to adjust it from there. Okay, so we'll bring that one forward as well for a first read.
Yes.
Yes, moving that forward.
Okay.
Why do we need referendum three? We passed the 900,000.
So we can discuss it.
That's on you
So the
all.
third item is the rehabilitation of the old fire station, and I think the vice mayor is suggesting that if they were successful, that, I mean, and so I guess could you let us know, how'd you come up with the 1 million? Like, is it?
That was a wild number. I remember Sam, because I had Sam do some takeoffs for us, some drawings. And he told us the fire station would cost X. So I took a Sam estimate from our architect and doubled it. So that's how I came to that number. He was like, oh, about $500,000 to do that. And I said, okay, then it's $1 million. So I don't have an exact number. He still, even when I squeezed and pressed him, he said, you know, if we don't move from that general concept, you're right, we should be able to fit into that $500,000 to $900,000, but going back, we said about the sewer project, just go for a slightly larger number just to be safe. But you're right, if the funding limitation changed, we could do that project within the new funding limit. I'm comfortable that we could undertake that. Because it's not that extensive of a project. It really isn't. It's just, you know, if we have to keep asking, you know.
Okay,
The real issue is if the funding limit doesn't pass, then we can't renovate the fire station.
Correct.
Correct.
and just because we're under a funding limit, I guess technically doesn't mean we don't go to referendum, right? I mean, you know.
You're doing it with sewer, you did it with fire. You can always go to referendum on specific
No,
projects.
I mean, even if it's below the limit though, I mean, you wouldn't, you know, but, you know, it's not like.
I mean, again, I guess that gets to the question, how much on a ballot do you want? You know, that could scare people. A busy ballot scares folks. We got 3 seats up. It could be a very full, we have a side and a half type ballot. Does that cause concern that it's too much, too frustrating?
Okay.
That's, I think where you're headed, Vice Mayor. Yeah. So, you know,
Mhm.
is that something, if you have to parse this down, is that something that, hey, we can focus on the compromise on the funding limit gets us to the number that we could build that, and it puts a limitation on what we can do with the old fire stations too.
Well, you're referencing now the referendum 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd say keep it on there until the end. Maybe let's keep it on there for discussion purposes, and that we can always drop it at the last. That-
Sure, I
that
was
would
hoping
be-
to have drawings for you to bring up, but those weren't, unless I got them just now, have not been made available. So sure, we could do that, and then you may not like the drawings. I think you guys will. It's
Oh,
pretty
I
much what
have-
we talked about, so.
Another issue with this, it says, the old fire station for use as an outdoor community area. I would have outdoor and indoor.
Mhm.
That is a
Because-
correct statement. That is a correct, yes.
You
Yep,
don't want it just outdoor.
correct. You're right.
Or do we want to even strike outdoor? Just call it a community area? Do we have to specify?
Community, yeah.
Do we have to specify outdoor? I mean, or indoor? I just call it a community area.
I think that's going to be very successfully met. I think people will be attracted to that. As
I mean,
as
it's got a
community
strong
use.
visual to sell too.
Community use. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just get rid of the word outdoor. I
Mhm.
think just for use as a community area should cover it.
I'm just concerned with having a specific item where a voter may say, oh, okay, this, but they don't need the other thing.
Duly noted, duly noted.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
maybe we'll just keep it on there. We'll just keep it on there and we can remove it at the end. So it's just draft at this point, or it's more
I mean, we'll bring
brainstorming.
them all as first reads and then you could say, no, we're not gonna move it.
Yeah, we can definitely, as we get more information on what it could potentially look like. maybe
And
that
again, you
would
can
also
remove
help.
it all the way to the second read too. You can get to the second reading. Maybe more folks show up
Yeah.
and say, nah, 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 you don't need that. Or maybe you start getting pushback that you're asking too much and
Right.
that's something that.
Right.
gets
So
pulled back.
we'll duly noted that it's possibly one to remove, but we'll just keep it on there just for brainstorming purposes.
Yes.
Okay, next referendum item. And this has to do with the canvassing board, using the Palm Beach County canvassing board. I'm in favor of this.
I think the big problem with this is that we can't educate people and no one's gonna know what this means. Other than the fact that we're giving up control on something.
Possibly got the word efficiently in there. The nice word, but other than that, you're right, it's.
Could we keep the language that we currently have and say and or? So we have the option, so the commission has the option to use. Maybe down the road, the commission would say, I don't want the county board to do that anymore. I don't like them anymore. I want to do it ourselves. So at least it gives you the option to do either one. So you're giving yourself a secondary option. Shall it be amended to allow the town commission to select the county canvassing board for that purpose? And then it gives them both options. Not that, we could say in the foreseeable future, but it does continue that option. Because maybe the next supervisor of election says, I don't want to do this. I'd rather have the locals do it. Or you never know who gets elected to these spots. Yes.
On an annual basis.
Yep.
I just keep it open, if they could do it once a month, they could do it once every 10 years. Why force them to do it every year? And
Because we have to. She always makes us go through the motions anyway, right?
every
Every election, Wendy
I'm
makes.
not
us-
gonna read Lamelda's mind, but I think once you all bless it and say that, I don't think it's gonna be coming back. Unless there's a groundswell of. I mean, we could do that easy enough.
Yeah,
I like that.
I think either or would work.
So any arguments of why would we give it up? No, you're just giving yourself the option to use the county canvassing board.
Okay.
I like that. Mr. Bowler?
Got it.
Yes, I would go forward with that. Yes.
All right.
Everybody's good?
Yes.
Okay. Bang.
Okay, I'm fine.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm proposing on number 5, we handle it exactly the same way we handled spending limit with 1 or 2 exceptions. One is in increasing from real dollars, 20 years ago, it would bring the salaries up to $25,000 for the mayor and $12,000 for the commissioners and vice mayor. I'm proposing we do that. I don't know because the 3% would make any significant, it might be nice and simple just to put that in to take it from one level to another. That's,
Could you clarify you said 25 for the mayor would be up high. You said 12,000 for the commission. They're already at 12,000.
I'm sorry,
Sorry. I didn't-
I think that 12,000, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, commission would be 19.6. Oh, no, that's
What's the
national.
number again?
Yeah, you didn't, I don't think there is for the mayor here.
It was 20, I'm sorry, it was 22 for the commission.
You
Yeah,
said
look at
25.
the chart.
Right,
That was the chart.
staff
Give me
put
the chart.
together,
27 for
the
the mayor.
27 and.
27, we looked at 2 of them. We looked at currently the mayor, the position of the mayor, that position.
Right.
is paid $15,000. And the commission, everyone else is paid 12,000. And so when we index those, we were looking at, again, using the same MSA methodology, that brings it to 27,500 for the mayor and about $22,000 for commission, which seems reasonable.
That would be my proposal.
And that was indexed over since 2004, based on the last salary resolution. Yep, okay.
Have we compared, how does that compare to other similar communities?
Not off the top of my head.
Last time we looked at that, it was all over the board.
That's what I
We're-
remember too.
Yeah.
There's very few that have zero, but there are a lot more that it's clearly surrounding communities are a lot more.
Yeah, but they're also a lot bigger. I mean, it's a,
Yeah, I'm
it's a,
saying
yeah, it's a different job in Boca and Delray.
maybe not in time. Sort of good size.
Yeah, but he's right. The other communities, they're all over the map.
What was the feedback last time from the last election? I know we focused so much on the others.
Well,
I don't really didn't focus on
what
this.
they
What kind of
was
pushback?
the fear apparently was that we'd increase our salaries to $100,000 and then it would be 5% a year on top of some initial crazy number.
That's why, in my opinion, making it exactly the same way just because of inflation and making the specific amount makes a very fixed, reasonable number. That was the thing.
So the inflation number was
27.5 and 22.
My thought is that's kind of high for us. I don't know. I don't know.
Then we could lower the mayor's.
And then the other issue is, I know that came up was, some people thought it shouldn't be, you shouldn't be voting in your own increase if it wouldn't apply to the person
Until
in
the
your
next
current,
elec-
until,
you're
the- until,
reelected.
yes,
Yeah, but
until you're reelected,
If
right?
this is a referendum, you're not voting in your own because the referendum is going to have a number in there. It's going to be a calculable number that we aren't technically voting in. The referendum is giving us permission to do it.
But the mayor's point, that flashback, South Palm did exactly that a couple of years ago. They increased, but it wasn't effective until the next time you were elected. So I don't know if you wanted to do that. That gives you the increase, but it defers. You'll be staggered. So some people will get the increase in a year from now, some in 2 years from now, depending on when your election is.
My opinion is that's not appropriate because the reasoning is inflation, not underpaid, overpaid. The reasoning is inflation. It's exactly the same amount that we put in the charter when it was put in 20 years.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay.
I would agree. It's for the same reason. Very same. As we looked at the funding. I mean, that has happened across the board in every profession over the years. That it may not have been in pace with the cost of living increase. But people are earning more. Inflationary costs are increased. Everything is significantly higher.
No, I've said everything that I have to on this topic.
So you're in favor of moving it forward?
Yeah, yeah. My question is, do we really want 5 referendums on this very busy ballot? And it may be referendum overload. Not that I disagree with the idea of the referendum itself, but that I don't know how long you're gonna keep people's attention if you keep having all these.
Yeah, I think we can definitely eliminate later. Let's not eliminate just yet, is my recommendation. Let's see what we end up with. because there could be, I'd say we're still in the brainstorming phase, so let's not eliminate just yet. Until,
Well, hopefully we'll get some feedback
yes.
and
yes.
we can determine what to eliminate
Right.
and what not to.
Right. Anything else you want to
No,
say?
thank you.
No. Yeah, I mean, I'm in a spirit of, we're in brainstorming phase and, we'll keep it on there. So, okay, moving on to,
That those all five
Oh,
will
those
come
are
back
five.
as ordinance
Okay.
first reads at the next commission meeting, which is October 3rd, and then we'll decide from there if we start parsing or moving forward. So if you see people, know who you may want to talk to, talk
mean,
to
I
those
guess-
folks and hopefully we can
Mhm.
move this
I would also,
expeditiously along. 'Cause we are at a little bit of a time crunch. Clerk keeps on pointing at me saying mid-November. So that's our deadline.
we're
So
making it, we're gonna make it. I guess the other thing I'd say is we are still in the brainstorming phase. So if someone comes up with another referendum question, I mean, this is, I don't have any more to add. But if anyone does come up with something else, this is the time, maybe next meeting, if there are any others.
And as a commission as a whole, we can't educate. But as individuals, we can talk to our own buildings
sure.
and
Absolutely.
educate as they ask questions.
And at these meetings, we can also.
You could go
discuss it.
you could make a public comment as an independent commissioner at the other boards. So you could go to the planning commissions. I'm just making a public comment, what we're doing. Here are the questions. Call any of us when you have a moment, if you have concerns or anything, and just letting them know in yet another public forum that you guys are all, the commission's moving down the path. We want your feedback, see what they say.
Oh, thank you. That's a good
Yeah.
recommendation.
Okay, very good. Next item, we have a Milani Park update. So on September 6th, Marshall and I met with Commissioner Marcy Woodward, the Director of Parks and Recreation for Palm Beach County, the Director of Facilities Development and Operations, and the Assistant County Administrator. So it was a bunch of us in the conference room here in Highland Beach. And as you know, we received their letter of intent that they plan to move forward with the design process for the park. And that was consistent with the message that we had at the meeting. Commissioner Woodward was firm that she wanted to move forward with the park. She was also firm on wanting to do it during her current term of office. She really does not want to defer the development of the park any longer. She specifically mentioned Ocean Hammock Park in Ocean Ridge. I don't know if any of you have been to Ocean Park, but it's a very passive park. That was her vision for the park here in Highland Beach. Doesn't exactly match all the provisions, the 43 conditions, but that's, something to discuss later. But that is something that she specifically mentioned. She did feel like she had local stakeholder support.
She absolutely did not. If that's what she took away from that meeting, then she needs to revisit it. Because we were very clear that we did not want this. And it was 3 different buildings from Boca Highland that had people there. And I don't know why. She also told us things that weren't true. She said if the county didn't do anything and they sold it, because that's what they would have to do. They don't have exercise another 5-year option. They would then be required to sell it. And that whoever bought in could make buildings there that were as tall as the tallest building in town. And oh, by the way, they would have to have affordable housing in there. And none of that was true. They would have to abide by current building codes, which wouldn't allow for a 17-story building. And the affordable income thing is a lot more difficult, but they were wrong anyway.
And we emphasized that there was no local support, that we discussed that it seemed like what she came away with, originally, there's what's in the settlement agreement, which is a much bigger scope of a park with a lifeguard station and restrooms and all that, and over 100 parking spots versus the smaller scale. And I just said, I think what you came away with, that given between the two options, people wanted, would prefer the smaller scale, but no way did you have a local stakeholder support. So we did emphasize that. We also discussed the archaeological assets that are on the property, which they were aware of, and shared the study that Lois found with them. So the parks individual talked about it, had some discussion, and then also the director of facilities development, she also was discussing about how they reach out to the public. So they will have they'll have more than one public outreach meeting. And so we were discussing like how they would communicate with the public. So they're willing to do a public outreach meeting, and we also specified it needs to be in season, January, February, March. So we asked for dates of when they would be available to host the meeting, which it would be here in this room.
Right.
And so they gave us 2 weeks, the week of January 22nd, the week of January 29th. And where they would come and deliver a short presentation, like a 20-minute presentation, and then would open it up to public comment. So it would be the opportunity for the public to come and make public comments to, I believe, Commissioner Woodward would be here, and the people from the county would be here.
So it would be based on some of the feedback we received from the FDOT. I had requested that they do allow for public comment following a presentation, so folks could come up and ask questions, voice concerns, be heard. They agreed to that. So they're willing to do that, and they want to make the presentation on the more passive. Mayor, if I'm correct, they want to present the passive.
Yeah.
They'll show what it could be, but they want to show the passive as the better of the options, and then take public comment on that design.
Did they also say that they think of this as phase one?
No, and they were thinking that this would be it, that this ocean hammock design would be the ultimate vision for the park. That it would just be one phase and that's it. And
they would sign off on that.
Well,
so according to the agreement, we all have to sign off on it because the agreement stipulates these 43 conditions, which includes lifeguard stand, restroom facilities, over 100 parking spots. So actually, if in order for that to move forward, the commission we all have to agree to modify the agreement, which is all in our agenda. So you can see, there's another item in there, parking. So one of the items is you have to have a parking attendant. And nowadays they have the metered parking, so that you wouldn't have an attendant. So if in order to move forward with that type, we would also have to agree, because the ocean hammock park actually is not consistent with the stipulated agreement that we have with the county. But I think the good news is if there has to be a park there, I think that is a better, in my opinion, that is a better final outcome than what's currently in the stipulated agreement.
I have, and actually all of Boca Highlands has safety concerns. If you've got an unattended parking lot, who's going to make sure that there aren't people there after dark? Because that was one of the things that had to be closed. I have to tell you, we're worried about people just walking into our development. You may not be able to drive in, but you park your car there and then you can walk in. And that's a big problem. How do we prevent that?
Absolutely. And we also raised those concerns and shared that with them. And those are the types of things that should be discussed at this outreach meeting. So in preparation of that outreach meeting, they would have their design. And then the public would be able to
I mean, are they
voice
gonna
their concerns.
come and pay for us to have a metal gates?
They
Yeah.
basically said it would be open and closed. They do in many other communities ask for the assistance of the local police department to help with some of that because they have a regional park manager that would move through the area. So that they did ask, the one ask I did make is that it is paid parking, because they said most of their stuff is free. But I asked that it be paid because then we would become just a parking lot for other events and facilities around. So at least it's a paid. They were amenable to
Which
that.
they've
Yeah.
done for others. So
Yeah.
Boca Raton,
Yeah,
they have a county park in Boca, and that was something stipulated by Boca that it be paid parking. So they have come across that before. So it would definitely have to be paid parking. I guess I'd say my recommendation would be, because they still have to iron out some of these details. They have to present to us our design, and then Marshall and I did share all these concerns, the traffic, the going into the neighboring property, the nuisance that would be caused, who's going to open and close the gates, who's going to make sure, because it's sunrise to, we did, the meeting lasted a couple of hours. And so we did discuss all those things. And basically, in a nutshell, their position was, we have these types of parks in other areas of Palm Beach County that are neighboring other residential properties. And they're saying that, all these horrible things that people raise, they're not having those types of issues in those parks. I mean, that's basically their response to us. So let's come up with a date that we, want to have this outreach meeting. They have to come up with their design and share that with us. And then we have to share our concerns with them. They need to hear firsthand what the concerns are.
And I did express to them, this is not going to, we will partner to house the meeting. This will not be a commission meeting,
their
is
meeting.
that we will be part of the audience, letting them use our facilities. Because I do not want to sit in front of this community to try to address the county's questions. So they have to take this and answer what their thoughts are independent of us. Because I think you guys have been pretty clear with what our vision is. So they have to do that. And I think that's their opportunity to hear from the community and see and hear the things that you're hearing from them.
Exactly. It's not for us to answer. Like, I can't answer those questions.
Yeah, right.
They
It's
really
they have to answer those.
questions. Yeah.
I would like to know, other than Hammond Park, where else they have parks of this nature? And I would like to inquire of those towns, not listen to the county. The county isn't going to tell you that there are problems.
Well, we did, Commissioner Goldberg and I did have a brief conversation with the town manager of Ocean Ridge. They said they really haven't had any issues with the park, that park. But again, that's immediately adjacent to a larger city park, Boynton Beach. Public beach. So they're just adjacent to a larger public beach that takes probably most of the traffic. But they said they haven't had a lot of issues or many issues. But again, we didn't inquire in any greater length. They just said they haven't heard and felt experience any bad problems there.
Are there buildings next to it? I'd like to know from the buildings whether they've had issues. Because if there are no facilities, then where are people going? Then, it's particularly if there are facilities nearby that are private. How do they, what do you do?
Yeah, they did mention there were a few, but maybe we can get a more exhaustive list. So there's the ocean hammocks in Ocean Ridge. There's another one in Singer Island, I think is what they mentioned, or up north that way
I
where
think like Blowing Rock, which is a bigger one, that's like Jupiter, Juno Beach.
and they did mention it was right next door to either a hotel and or
Yeah, The one on Singer
uh,
Island is, yeah.
or a condominium and next to other, but I mean, we can ask more specifically for a list. They did rattle off a bunch of parks that are next to properties. And then I guess the other, and this is for them to explain, not me to explain, but apparently there's some initiative to have enough public access beach for the population. And I guess that was one of their rationale for developing this park at this time, as opposed to deferring it, is to meet this objective of having public access beach.
It's one of their
on the county.
comprehensive plan goals, and in their county master plan, county parks master plan, there is identified need for more beach access for the greater Palm Beach County residents, because there's only so much beach access, but as the population continues to grow at these double-digit increases, that the demand for those type of beaches and services expands. They want to be able to meet that goal. So that's the administrative perspective from the county is we've studied it, we need it, we own it, we're going to build it. And I would confirm what the mayor said. They were quite firm that a park is coming.
I don't want it to cost us anything. As in overtime for police. And
Those would be, Chief Hartman and I will talk. I know that he's talked with the Parks Department at length before, but we'll have to, as it moves forward, again, we did express that at the meeting. Our concern is that the trespass concern, which may not be big to them because they're not going to be there, but to us, it's going to be a big deal. Those are the things that, Chief Hartman will be having to deal with, not so much general park issues as much as getting calls. I could see it from the Boca Highland Beach Club. Hey, why is this person in our bathroom using our pool? But they said that doesn't happen, but I could see people drifting into the high warm sand in front of other.
happens now where people jump over the gate. And
We expressed that. So we told them that,
So-
that's a, yeah.
that's an inaccurate perception on their part. I have major safety concerns. I want to know how they're going to deal with the increased flow of traffic. As it is now, there are days where when the bridge is up, the traffic on A1A backs up all the way past Boca Highland. And it means another cut in the road. And actually, there are multiple cuts and additional cuts in the road because Mrs. Milani's 9 units is going to have a cut in the road. The traffic has become, last year, it was way worse than I have ever seen it. There were days it took me 15, 20 minutes just to get across so I could go north instead of south. How are they going to deal with that?
They are going to do a traffic study as part of it with cooperation with FDOT. So yeah,
And when would they do the study? The
I think they're
study
doing it
is-
now. They're starting like they're.
No, doing it now,
Oh, they do
It's-
traffic counts again. They said it's going to be, they're not building this project like this summer. It's going to be a year or two, probably 2 years before they even do anything. And they would do the traffic
but
counts.
you need to do the traffic count when there are people here. Not in the middle of the summer. It's got to be January, February, March, when we have a lot of traffic. Now, it would be useless. In case you couldn't tell, my community does not like this idea. I mean, somebody mentioned having an armed guard on our private beach. And we don't allow signs on our beach,
Correct.
but I think we're gonna have to.
You would have to amend the ordinance, but yes.
We would have to amend the ordinance to allow people to put up signs. Because even things as silly seeming as you're in a marina and there are large boats, you know, people feel they have the right to just walk up on them and see what they're like. You have houses that have pools and they, you know, they might be able to easy access into the homes when people aren't there. And what would happen is if all of these things happened, we then lose our property values. Because that's not a benefit to most people. It would be a detriment. Because you have safety issues.
Yeah, definitely a lot of concerns, which, you know, this first public outreach meeting, you know, I think is really important. And I'm glad. So the 2 weeks in question. So I guess I'd like to get a day on the calendar so that there'll be no issues when it comes up that, and we were recommending 6 PM on, you know, to try to get as much attendance as possible. So we have the weeks of January 22nd or January 29th. I mean, I guess I'd recommend it be a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. According to Lois, the director of the library, both those weeks, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, are available at 6 PM. So I don't know if anyone has a preference.
Can you say those dates again?
Not a Wednesday? Okay,
Not
so,
Wednesday.
okay, let's
The
not,
week- the
not a
week-
Wednesday, right? You said? Okay, so, so a
Any-
Tuesday or a Thursday. So the weeks, so I'd say the dates in question are January 23rd, which is a Tuesday at 6 PM. Thursday, January 25th at 6 PM. Or Tuesday, January 30th at 6 PM. Or Thursday, February 1st at 6 PM. I don't know, I guess I'm kind of in favor of maybe like Thursday, February 1st.
I would go
that's-
with,
that's
yeah,
fine.
either the 30th or the 1st. I would take it to the end of the month.
Right.
Pretty close to Groundhog's Day. We've been doing this for 30 years. I don't know.
Yes, maybe February 1st is the better date.
That's, what is the date?
I would recommend Thursday, February 1st
Sure.
at 6 PM, if that's okay with everybody. And then we can get back to them, and then it's a hard date, and
And then when would they hold the second meeting?
We'll see where it goes
it's-
from
it's
there.
a- It's a,
Progressive.
yeah. we-
Gotta watch parking
February.
too.
right,
Parking.
yeah. Oh, I know, for the meeting, for sure.
I'll reach out to Father Horgan and see if we can have for overflow
that's
parking
great.
over at the church, just so if folks,
Good idea.
we run out and then we still have people going. They can go from there and we'll put it on YouTube for sure, right? Can we live broadcast in here? I'm looking at Teresa, sorry. Or we can live. Just like this, we could do a live broadcast. At least we have it and we record it and then people, if they can't make it, can watch it from home or that nature. Yep.
And that'll be a good meeting to start to share our concerns with the county. And they can unveil whatever plans, designs that they have.
And once we confirm that, I'll have Skender start sending that out on the weekly blast. Maybe, you know, starting in maybe late October, November to get, and then we'll start hearing from folks. So I'll let you know before we send it out the first time. We'll give the commission a heads up. Because we'll probably be like, what's this? You know, so we'll all be ready to go.
Okay, moving along. Next item on the agenda is to approve and authorize the mayor to execute contract with the U.S. Water Service Corporation in an amount of $428,238.21 for lift station number 3 rehabilitation project in accordance with invitation to bid number 23-005.
And again, this is the appropriation project. So we're going to spend those appropriation dollars.
Well, yeah, you basically went over the gist of it. But if you want to just, more, if you wanted to hear the results of the entire bid, we had bids for $428,000, like you said, from U.S. Water Services Corporation. Our two other bids were for $466,000 and for $757,000. And then Baxter and Woodman, our engineering firm, reviewed them for technical sufficiency. So they gave us the green light and their letter of recommendation. I reviewed for administrative forms, bid forms, background work history, stuff like that. That was all good. The reference check came out very well for U.S. Water Services. So our recommendation is to execute an agreement with U.S. Water Services in accordance with ITB number 23-005 for lift station number 3 rehabilitation.
So I have a question. Oh, what was the difference there? So the lowest bid was this 428,000, and then the next highest was like 50,000 more, and then the
Yeah.
highest over that was like a substantial amount more.
It
So
was a
what was the
200,000.
reason? What was the reason for the difference in prices, do you know?
No one can really give an exact answer on that. I think what most people say is they kind of get it, aren't a super serious bidder and just kind of throw a number at it and see if they luck into it. Either that or they don't really want it, but they still want to be seen as responsive for us to keep them in mind. So they give a really high number. They know they're probably not going to get it, but it keeps them in mind for future projects that they've bid on our stuff before. That's just my guess, though.
Yeah, even comparing the two lower bids, which were in fact far apart, some of the individual breakdowns, the differences were incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes no sense unless that's where they're padding costs.
It is interesting how there were like
You
10 or
know,
11 items.
Yeah,
Someone's
something
over
is
by 50.
$2,500 and then it's 250,000. Yeah,
Right. And then on a different item, they'll reverse it. One will be way higher, one will be way lower.
yeah. Makes me wonder about the whole thing, to be honest.
Well, that's how they tuck their margins in. So basically some will make it up and they want to keep their mobilization charge down, but they'll get you on per unit or for the concrete service or this or that. So they have to get their margins. They just move them around as to how they get it, or they may have like US Water's huge, right? So they may get a good deal on one product
Mhm.
and then they put their profit in another. So they kind of do those type of games.
And the references, who do you contact for is it all the projects that they previously had done? You contact them? for
Yeah, so they
references?
give us a reference form of like 3 to 5. I think this one had 3 references each. So it's usually one was from the county, they're usually from like South Florida Water Management District or something like that, or another town. So I'll reach out to them. I know there was like an engineer at a town, a project supervisor at the county, people like that directly work with them.
And it was
All good.
good, all good.
Yep, I
Okay.
reviewed them and the second just to make sure, but it was glowing for US Water Services.
Okay. Well, if there's no other discussion, we could have a motion.
I move that we approve the funding and authorize the mayor to sign a contract with U.S. Water Services Corp. For ITB number 23-005.
Second,
We have a roll call.
Commissioner David,
Yes.
Commissioner Goldberg.
yes.
Vice Mayor Stern,
Yes.
Mayor Moore,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, next item, the discussion of the financial advisory boards. I don't know, are we supposed to say recommendation or?
Again, because they didn't have a quorum, they couldn't recommend. I know Dr. Greenwald reached out to some of the folks just saying they were generally supportive of the modifications, but they couldn't make any formal motions. I know David's been in that seat a few times, but there isn't a quorum, so you're kind of like, everybody generally okay kind of statement. So generally supportive. Dr. Greenwald and team did ask a lot of questions of Eric to kind of get to how we got to this point. And they were at the end of the day very supportive, but they couldn't give a formal motion to recommend.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Eric Farmer, Town Manager's Office. Just to go through this, I just want to say thanks to Tarcivia's office for their help with putting this together. And Skender did a lot of editing and help with this. Also, other municipalities had a lot of good input to get us moving on this. Some of the big changes with this policy were mostly definitions and cleaning up language. The biggest change is that thresholds, the quotes, and going out for bid. And before I even mention or get into the pricing, it's important to note that no part of this process changed. So the town manager still approves everything, the department head still approve everything, so that's not changing. So all the safeguards remain intact. So the only thing that changes is the dollar thresholds. So for one quote right now, it's at $2,500. That will go to $10,000. For 3 quotes, it goes from $2,500 to $10,000. And then, I'm sorry, from $2,500 to $10,000 to $10,000 to $50,000. And then for bids, it goes from 25,000 to 50,000 above. Some of the main reasons for this change, FEMA currently recommends a $10,000 threshold. So they refer to this as micro purchases. Right now, we're at 2,500. This really comes into play if we have any emergency situations. We have to go out, get a lot of stuff done, and be efficient about it because it's an emergency situation. When we go to get reimbursed for this stuff, they give us the leniency of having a $10,000 limit. So if we cut it any short, we're limiting our efficiencies and what we're able to do in that type of situation. Talked to the town of Palm Beach, they recommended moving it to 10,000. They're doing the same thing, so that's the way everything's going. Inflation, I don't even need to get into that. We know where that's at. We talked about that today a bunch. What else? It's difficult for us to even get reports in some cases, right? So low purchase volume here, small profit margins for companies bidding here. I mean, there's limited businesses in the area, and they know, because we've gone out for these things for years, right? So if we go out for something, they know what their pricing is, what their competitors are. So sometimes it's like very difficult to even get a quote for them because they know they're not getting the job at all. Some of the examples of this, painting the water tower, the walk path pavement repair, and restriping the roadway. And that's just from the last like year and a half. So, I mean, just like we're trying to move everything else, it's just similar, some microcosm of that. So, with that, if you guys have any questions.
I'll just piggyback a little bit on that. Especially difficult on repair services. And maybe you see this at the condo buildings as well. Need to get a plumber in, something a little bit more complicated. The guys can't get to it. You need to get somebody in with some equipment, a plumber. They can't come out. I mean, unless it's like overflowing. So it's a non-emergency. This needs to be repaired. We can't get people to show up because they know what we're doing. They know that, you know, Pat's just calling to get a number. I'm not going to drive out there, look at the project, give you a $2,200 repair, knowing that, you know, somebody comes in at $2,150. They're not coming. So we're having difficulties on that low end side to get folks to come out, drive out to here to do the work. They have to be insured. So those things don't go away. The safeguards, like Eric said, still in play. So they're just not coming. It's just not worth their time. And then, you know, it takes Pat or Sergio or Dave in the water plant. They're on the phone for 2 days trying to find people to show up.
I mean, sometimes it could even be weeks or.
Yeah, they just won't come. They just won't show up. They just, no thanks.
Very small thing that just needs to be fixed. So it really is a hang up at some points in this process. And I think it's just great that we could create this efficiency, especially with FEMA allowing us to do something like this. And that's going to be, I'm expecting the standard like nationally.
Mhm.
And that's the way people are moving. So this is an ordinance. We don't change this all the time, but this will allow us to do this now and be a little bit ahead of the curve because this is where everything's going. So.
What's the difference between 3 quotes and a formal solicitation?
So 3 quotes, you go out and you can say, okay, I need to I don't know, just use one of these examples. We want to paint the water tower. We go out and see what companies even go to paint water towers. What are the what services these people provide? So we'll go out, we'll call them, hey, this is, the work we're trying to complete, or we'll email them and say, could you please quote us for this job, paint the water tower, we need it by this date. When you're going out for a formal solicitation, there's a lot of different laws and regulations that now are in play, depending on what you're going out for bid for, dictates what you need to do. I mean, when you sat on the selection committee for our auditor, that was a specific process that was dictated by Florida state law. So it's a more, like it says, a more formal process. Got to put it out for bid for 30 days. Depending on if it's a bid, an RFP or an RFQ, you have a selection committee. They have to review everything. They come back. You guys have to, review it and accept it. So it's a little bit more involved.
Think like the lift station. Skender just did a formal solicitation, got 3 firms in, had to validate them, the engineer's letter of recommendation, do all the formal checks, put it on Demand Star. They have to submit a formal bid with all these forms, Now, AC units down. I need a coil touched up. I'm calling Tom's, I'm calling, Pete's AC. They come by and say, I do that for $600. They put it on a piece of paper. I get 3 quotes. Who's the best? Go from there.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense and it's consistent with what a lot of other towns do. It's more efficient for you guys. It's, it's basically just inflation like we've been talking about. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yes, I agree, Megan.
You good?
No, yeah, I think it needs to be done.
Thank you.
So we don't need a motion for this?
I think it has to have. It's a first, I think we have to have a first read of the ordinance, and then we have to have a second.
We're not doing that.
Did they?
I don't, didn't-
23 dash, it has no number, but it.
Oh, that's-
where is that?
In the back side, it has all the stuff that's changing. We'll just bring it back under consent for the first and second readings. That sound good?
Yes.
That'd be easy. Yeah. Yeah, we can make use of that consent agenda
There you go.
more and more. Very good. Commissioner comments, Commissioner Goldberg?
I do. The hour is late and I'll make it brief, but I did want to let everyone know that I've been participating on behalf of the town in the 2023-2024 Florida League of Cities, a legislative policy process as that pertains to municipal affairs. So together with other municipal officials across the state, the policy committees of the Florida League of Cities develops the league's legislative platform to address priority issues most likely to affect municipal governance. So I am serving on the committee, the Finance, Taxation, and Personnel Committee, which addresses general finance and tax issues, home rule revenues, infrastructure funding, insurance, tax, collective bargaining, tax and budget reform. And the legislative committee meetings are held in September, October, November. So I went to the September, I look forward to October 6th to the 7th and the November meeting. It's been very informative. I'll bring back as the policy develops, as discussion develops, the intent is that each of the 5 committees, legislative committees, will come up with at least 1, possibly 2, that they want to advocate before the legislature. The session starts in January. So I'll keep you more abreast of that as it goes along. I do want to ask the commission for permission to support me in attending the National League of Cities Summit that's going to be held in Atlanta, Georgia in November. And if the commission would support me attending that.
So do we need a motion on that?
Sure.
I mean, I support it. I think it's great education, you know, being around, going to those sessions. They are very informative. So I support it.
Okay. You need a motion?
Just a consensus. If you guys are okay, we don't, it's easy. I just want to make, yeah, okay.
We have
Okay,
consensus.
thank you.
Yep, yep.
Thanks for doing that, Judy. Mr. David.
No, nothing today, thank you.
Okay, Vice Mayor.
Nothing, welcome back. Town ran pretty good without you. Welcome back.
That's my team over there. Look at those three. Keep my office together while I'm out. I love it.
So the only question I had with the presentation we had today from Andy Studd, you know, regarding the Coastal Resources Program, and he mentioned that the only way to get money from FEMA regarding beach nourishment is if we had like a dune program. So this dune study that we've commissioned,
First,
does that qualify for that? I guess what I'm
It's-
trying to say is, can we move forward in meeting at least the minimum requirements for FEMA in order to have this dune program so that we can position ourselves for
this would be what we were undertaking is ideally the first step to become officially designated. There's more to it. If you want to be a critically eroded, or if we just want to have a dune program for FEMA, the scale and scope and some of the details a little bit different, but we are taking the first step because it's going to tell us how bad is it? Are we changing a lot over time? And it kind of creates the basis for our dune program. And what he said that was kind of the trigger was actively maintaining the dune structure. So if we have a program and we're seeing folks penthouse, right?
Mhm.
Are more condos doing it, more private homes doing this stuff to maintain it, we can, I believe, show that. But I think we have to formalize it a little bit, and that's something we will speak with either Andy and or the results that our consultant finds, you know. How bad is it? Is it bad? It may not be bad, you know? So we're gonna have to figure those details out. But yes, this is the first step.
But I'd like to
All my notes were kind of the same. I
Yeah.
saw everybody's taking those same notes, like, are we doing these things? We are taking the correct steps now. And we'll have to, there's a conference I'll go to for the technical stakeholders for the Beaches and Shores Association. So I go with the Andy and some of the other engineers and I just yank on their ear and say, what does this entail? How does that work? Does this make sense? And you get more of the bureaucratic details out of FEMA. You talk to a FEMA contact. What is it? So I always tell you the story where I have like Fire Island, okay, outside of New York, right?
Mhm.
That got I think it was Sandy, just eviscerated Fire Island. FEMA paid to restore it. It wasn't a beach restoration project because they had a program to maintain that front and because it was a barrier island protecting the city. And they've been working on keeping it. They restored that with FEMA emergency dollars to put that beach back together because it did have a value to protect that New York City metro area. So it, you know, so
Okay.
we just got to make sure we're following those same steps to put it
Yeah, I
in
would
place.
definitely want to pursue that for sure. And when do we expect to get the results of that dune study that we've commissioned?
They've already been out there.
Okay,
So I'm just gonna ask questions. Tricia's gonna say yes or no. They're done with the field work. We should get a report here in about 2 months. You don't have a microphone, so I'll just repeat it. But yeah, so they're moving right along. They had an opening in their schedule. They came out. And now they're putting together their findings and into the report structure.
And they're going to compare that with the
The
last.
previous study, yep. And then also identify those critical dune areas. So, there we are. We're starting to identify areas that need to be fixed, so.
yeah, I think that's great. I think it's all kind of fitting
Mhm.
together and the pieces are falling into place. That's it for me. Town attorney, any?
Other than to thank Eric for working with Jen in our office. Nobody ever sees Jen Unique, but she's behind the scenes, gets a lot of stuff done, and they work together on this project for a while. So thank you, Eric.
No, manager.
We got some checks to sign. Everything again, just budget meeting on Thursday, 5:01. It will probably be our quickest meeting. There's nothing else on that agenda. It's just to approve the budget, which you've seen many a times. And if you've heard anything, let David or I know that are a question, comment, or concern. Everything's in place. We're in good shape. The ads. Everything's good. We've signed stuff to commence the audit, so we're going to be ahead of what we've traditionally been. So the financial side of the house is moving right along. So we're in good shape.
Excellent. And with that, it's 4:29 and we can adjourn our meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Night.